This story begins with the protagonist reporting that her mother died on a wedding trip. Some woman slapped the girl with all her might and exclaimed where she dares to stick her insolent face. Let her remember where she is and know her place. Ophelia found herself in the Duchy of Arpad when her mother remarried. She thought to herself that if it weren't for Isolde, Tristan would still be alive. She was there for the benefit of her mother's happiness, even though the pleasure of it did not come to her. However, that house soon became a place she should not have been. Her mother had been born into a rural farmer's family. The surroundings didn't match her beauty. She was like a white crow. The woman said that her grandfather had always believed that there was nothing more important in the world than money, and was going to sell her mom to a landowner whose age had already passed 30. However, she did not want to spend her valuable life in such an insignificant place. So one night her mother ran away from her native home. She did so along with a mercenary who was passing by the village. Then she established herself in a small port town in the south, and after all these events, our heroine was born. I wish I could say it ended well, but it wasn't. In her mind were memories of her parents' constant quarrels. The man shouted that they could not afford to live in such a rich neighborhood, and the woman asked to do at least something for her. Sometime later, when the father left for a neighboring town for a few weeks, the mother ran away, taking her as well. The woman was like a butterfly, distant at any attempt to reach out to her. The daughter was always worried and wouldn't let her go. Although they were blood relatives, their relationship was very fragile. The girl thought to herself that if her mother was dissatisfied with her, she would leave her just like her father. She really didn't want that to happen. Taking the entire family fortune with them, she and her mother set off northward. The farther they went, the higher the prices became. So the money they had on hand ran out almost immediately. Eventually, the woman had to sell the ruby ring her father had given her, and then they learned that he had died trying to quell a rebellion. After the mother was widowed and things got worse, she fell in love with a knight who owned feudal land. A few years later, however, the new father died in the throes of sepsis. The woman was terribly homesick, but after a while she became friends with Baroness Blanche, who served her new father. After that, she recovered in no time. Mom became a companion of the fragile madam, and then began to accompany her to receptions. The young and beautiful widow was gifted with many male gazes, but unfortunately, fallen into Mom's soul was none other than Baron Blanche himself. There were strained relations between the Blanche couple, as their marriage was only political in nature. Then the Baroness fell ill. Madame's strength gradually left her, and soon she left her last precept. The woman asked to take care of her husband. Soon after the funeral, the mother married the Baron. People whispered that they felt she had gotten close to Madame Blanche for a reason. Not much had passed since the funeral ceremony. Maybe she had planned this from the beginning. However, strong, compared to his previous wife, the Baron was struck down by illness. The year our heroine turned 19, he died on the way to hunting, falling from his horse. The woman asked Ophelia what sin she had committed, why her husbands were passing away. When all those who mourned the Baron's passing had departed, and Mama shared her sadness alone, they were visited by Duke Arpad, who was a friend of Baron Blanche. Even after the funeral ceremony was over, he remained at the mansion and continued to help them. When our heroine sometimes went out into the garden, she often saw the Duke together with her mother. And when it was time for him to leave, they were so close that it was perfectly safe to hold hands and embrace. When the carriage drove away and her mother turned around and looked at her, the girl realized that very soon she would become the Duchess of Arpad. The next year, when the scandalous rumors about her mother began to subside, they went to their new home. The woman said that she had heard that the former spouse of the Duke had left this world immediately after the birth of the heir. Now her mother would be the new Duchess. Wasn't the daughter overjoyed? Ophelia smiled and replied that, of course, if her mother was happy, so was she. The young man who met them exclaimed that he missed Isolde very much. Suddenly, a lad approached our heroine, and he had a voice, the hoarseness of which had not yet subsided because of puberty. Stan, on the other hand, looked like an ice sculpture. This was her first meeting with Alexander, who would now be her younger brother. The girl said she was pleased to meet him. She thought to herself that she had a brother for the first time. After a while, some woman yelled at our heroine and told her to get out. She was stopped by Alexander and told that she was accusing the wrong person. The sister was tired too, and she was having a very hard time. The woman was indignant that, "What other sister? What is he even saying? Let him not talk nonsense. This wench isn't even listed in the Arpad family." Ophelia thought to herself that she didn't need all this. She was going to leave this place anyway. After that, she rushed away. The girl only wanted to stay there until the end of her mother's funeral ceremony. She was a stranger to her after all. Despite the fact that the woman considered her happiness more important than her own daughter, our heroine still thought of her as the only mom in the whole world. If she had known that this would happen, she would have followed her. The girl would have at least once asked if she could go, would have said that she would not be a hindrance. Now she was left all alone. When our heroine stood near the horse, unnoticed came Alexander, who asked where she was going at such a late hour. The girl at first wondered how long he had been standing there at all, after which she replied that she was leaving the place. The young man grabbed her arm and exclaimed, "Where to? Why is she leaving their house without warning?" The young man shouted that he would not let this happen. Ophelia, on the other hand, shouted that he would let her go. After all, they were not having a contest. When the boy reiterated once more that he wouldn't let her go, the girl exclaimed, "Why?" He himself was uncomfortable with her, what for the sake of which he was trying to keep her. Alexander replied that if she left the mansion, there would be no adults left in the house. But more importantly, she could be putting herself in danger. Our heroine asked, since when is she an adult? Just like the woman said, she's not even on the Arpad family registry. The guy said that if she wanted to, they could do it even tomorrow, but the girl replied that that's right, she didn't want to. When Ophelia asked to let go of her hand and stop, because they are not 5 years old to behave so infantile, she saw that the young man had tears in his eyes. Our heroine immediately began to apologize to him and said that she overdid it. The brother replied that he was very scared and lonely. Of course, the news of the appearance of a new mother and older sister discouraged him, but he was very happy. However, even before he got used to it, his father and mother had left this world. It seems as if he has been abandoned. His family is no longer alive, and he cannot stop thinking about the fact that he was left all alone. In the words of the young man, our heroine recognized herself, so she hugged him tightly. After that, she added that she thought it would be better for him if she disappeared. The young man asked how it even occurred to her. Ophelia replied that she simply felt that she was not welcome in this place. Neither he nor the other inhabitants of the duchy. Alexander said it was true that he had felt some sort of rejection the first day they met. Such a small person was older than him, and his father had said to call her Big Sister. The girl smiled and said that it was very cold outside, so it was better to go back. Her brother asked her to promise that she would not leave the house late at night again without saying a word. The girl apologized and said she couldn't, as she only came back today because he stuck to her. However, if she lingers there will be rumors after all. They were brother and sister for only 1 month. So, under what pretext should she stay? Alexander said that even if it's only a month, but they are still brother and sister, aren't they? He too is well aware that she is uncomfortable in this estate. But let her stay at the mansion, at least until the young man is an adult. Ophelia said that his adulthood is still 3 whole years away. Does he really want her to wait that long? The guy exclaimed that he would make sure that no one else would touch her and she would stop feeling uncomfortable. Our heroine wondered if he was always like this. It's very strange. Alexander is not like himself. The girl replied that okay, but let him promise her that if she wishes to leave after 3 years, he will not hold her back for anything. The young man replied that there was no way. That very night, our heroine could not understand the true reason why he wished her to remain in the duchy. After a while, Uncle Adrian approached Alexander and apologized for being late. He said he would hurry, but ended up missing the funeral ceremony, then turned his attention to the lady, and noted that she too was having a hard time right now. After which he asked what her name was. Our heroine replied that Ophelia and shook his hand. Casey immediately exclaimed irritably whether the man even saw her. He replied that of course he did. How could one not notice their second beauty? However, he was still more attracted to this girl. After that, he began to ask how old she would be this year, because he had begun to look for a bride. The young man interrupted him and asked if he had come to the Duchy of Arpad just to find a sweetheart. Adrian replied that it wasn't his specific purpose, but in between, why not? The woman told them to stop and, turning to Alex, added that they hadn't agreed. Then she said that the sun was so warm today, so why don't they take a walk in the flower garden? The young man asked what that was even about. She replied that since Tristan was gone, he had a lot on his shoulders, so they wanted to stay in the Duchy of Arpad and help him out a bit. The young man replied that it was the first time he had heard of it, and she said it as if it were already decided. The old lady replied that he was busy, so they exchanged opinions between themselves. Cassie immediately jumped in and asked if she could change her quarters. It's just that the dining room and living room are very far away from the guest room. If Alexander's room is next to hers, however, that would be very good, and they can see each other more often. She had looked around the mansion yesterday and found a bedroom that would suit his taste perfectly. The guy interrupted her abruptly and said that, "Thank you for your help," but enough was enough. The girl exclaimed that he would be more comfortable with them, but the guy interrupted her again and said he was fine. The girl objected that there were no adults left in the duchy. Let him not be stubborn and take their intentions into consideration as well. The young man smiled and asked why there weren't any left. This is also where his sister Ophelia is. Our heroine finally realized why he was begging her not to leave. The woman said that he is still young, so he does not understand anything. Let him listen to what adults say now. Alexander replied that he was grateful that they wanted to stay late to help him, but he had heard that they were causing a lot of trouble for their household. Today was the 5th time the servants had taken sick leave. Therefore, as aristocrats who can't even manage the people below them are going to help the Duchy of Arpad, they should all be very ashamed of themselves. As a result, one fine day, the mansion was completely deserted. There were practically no people left. Alexander appeared in the dining room and asked how her cheek was, for she had been hit very hard. The girl replied that it was fine. She would just apply a compress a little later. The guy asked when exactly she planned to do it. He's been on edge since yesterday, and while they're on the subject, the young man offers to go upstairs for him to apply the salve. As they approached his room and the young man told her to come in, a memory came over the girl. Some time ago, Alexander had angrily asked her if she had come to him at such a late hour for some trifle. Ophelia replied that she had heard that he had a cold and just wanted to pass him some tea. Noticing that our heroine unwittingly looked into his room, the guy hissed how dare she inspect it without permission. She has absolutely no manners whatsoever. Reflections were interrupted by the voice of her brother, who asked what happened. Maybe something was wrong. The girl thought about the fact that 2 weeks ago he behaved differently. Why did he suddenly become so friendly? When Alexander opened the desk drawer, our heroine saw the diary and asked if he kept it. The young man asked to keep it a secret, since he was a little embarrassed. Ophelia replied that she actually has no one to tell it to, even if she wanted to. The young man said that it would sting a bit, so it would move the hair away from her face. Touching them, Alex noted that they were very soft. This is the first time the boy has ever touched a woman's hair. They are just like a spider's web. Our heroine replied that, whatever it is, first of all, she is his sister. Alexander replied that she says everything right and apologized to her. The girl thought to herself that every time she looked at him, she realized how beautiful he was. She didn't know whether it was his snow-white skin or his handsome face that attracted her. However, her eyes were drawn to him. When the guy finished and told her to be careful not to dirty her hair, our heroine thanked him and said that she would go. But the guy abruptly pulled her dress and asked her if she was leaving so quickly. When she almost fell backwards, Alexander apologized and said that it turned out by itself. Ophelia asked him to be careful. No matter how it went down, he was a man and she was a woman. The young man objected that after all, she herself said that she was a sister, not a woman. Our heroine clarified that she meant that in biological terms. Then she thanked him and added that she did not think that he would show such courtesy. The young man handed her the ointment and told her to take it with her. Let her apply it after taking a bath, and the wound would heal in no time. The girl thanked him and said that she would refuse to take it, as one application was enough. When Ophelia left, the young man thought about her words that he was a man and she was a woman. Then he came to the conclusion that he would indeed go mad like that. Some time later, our heroine sat thinking about her mother, who told her that she was becoming more and more like Isolde. Suddenly, a maid appeared in her bedroom and asked if she could clean her chambers. It's such a nice day, and it's not even snowing. Would she like to go for a little walk? Ophelia remembered the servants whispering that they really hoped she wasn't planning on staying any further in the mansion. On top of that, she wasn't even listed in the family registry. No servant had spoken to her in this house. This girl was clearly unusual, so she replied that was fine. Then she would go to the flower garden for now. While our heroine was walking, Adrian's voice rang out, asking who it is that they have such a walker there. Is not their beautiful Ophelia? The girl said that she thought he had already left the duchy. The man replied that he was going to, but decided to stay a little longer, as he hadn't been to the Arpad mansion for a long time. But don't let him think he has no interest in the state of the Arpad dynasty. He has enough money of his own. Then he asked her if she wanted to go for a walk together, since she had such a chance. Our heroine thought to herself that no matter how it was, Adrian was Alex's relative and an earl, so she could not recklessly oppose him. On the way out, the man asked if she remembered the conversation from last time. Ophelia asked for clarification as to which one. Adrian reminded her that it was about him finding a beloved bride. He had heard that the girl had come of age this year. What does she think about it? Whether the earl is not fit to be her bridegroom? Will she be able to live without any envy of others, although not as luxurious as the Duchy of Arpad? Our heroine thought to herself that, what other groom? Is he really talking seriously now? Just no shame, no conscience. How could he think of marrying a 20-year-old girl? Suddenly, a maid burst into the flower garden and said that Mr. Alexander was looking for her. The girl thought to herself that it was strange, because he had never called her in such a way. Then she asked him where she should go. The man said indignantly that she should go a little later. The maid objected that the gentleman had told her to come now. When our heroine went where she was told, she saw Alexander, waist-deep naked while practicing. Ophelia thought to herself that when he was in his shirt, she hadn't noticed it. After which she muttered that he had a nice body. When the young man asked what she had just said, our heroine realized that she had accidentally said it out loud, so she replied that it was nothing. After which, the girl asked what he had called her for. The guy replied that he did not understand what she was talking about. Our heroine replied that it was given to her by a maid with blonde hair. Alexander replied that he did not recall, as he does not remember absolutely all the maids. One of the young men called out to him and said that it was time to go back to training. The boy replied that he would be right there. Then he leaned over and whispered in Ophelia's ear that the maid had gotten something wrong, but he was even grateful to her because he could meet her here. After a while, the maid said that she had indeed lied then, and it was true. She didn't look well when the girl saw her wiping the window, and for some reason thought she should help. Noticing that her hands were all abrasions, the girl took the ointment and told her to apply it, then added that even though she lied, she really wanted to help her. The maid exclaimed happily that it had been so long since she had such a good quality cream. When the girl asked what her name was, the maid smiled broadly and said Henrietta. Standing near the window, Ophelia remembered the maid's words that she didn't look very good when she saw her wiping the window, and for some reason thought she should help. After which, she stated that not only her face, but also the color of her hair couldn't even be seen from here. However, the maid claims otherwise, and this situation is kind of strange, due to the fact that the Duchy of Arpad has a long and rich history. Our heroine was able to find hard-to-find books in their library without too much effort. Seeing a book called Grimoire, Ophelia noted that as far as she knew, there were no mages in this family then. What does this edition do there? She then noticed that Alexander was sleeping on the couch in the library, and wondered if it was possible to sleep in a bed after all. After a while, the young man's voice sounded, saying that she was absorbed in reading. The girl replied that, and he was absorbed in sleep. The young man replied that, apparently from fatigue, he was a little drowsy. Our heroine asked if the book he was reading was interesting. Alexander replied that yes, it was quite entertaining. The protagonist of the work was stupefied by a character nearby, as a result of which he began to commit murders one after another. The writing style is a bit boring, however. The character who kills the protagonist at the end seemed very interesting, particularly the phrase that described him. A newborn who came into the world by ripping open his mother's womb. After which, the young man asked what his sister thought about it. The girl was confused and did not understand the purpose of his question. Therefore, she answered that she had not read the novel, so she does not know what is there and how. But to be honest, it's kind of gross. When Ophelia said that her throat was a little dry so she would be on her way, the guy immediately grabbed a bell and started ringing it. A moment later, a maid appeared and asked if the master had summoned her. The young man asked the maid to bring something to drink. Something with alcohol would be nice, and addressed her by the name Henrietta. The girl noted to herself that he had clearly told her yesterday that he did not memorize the names of all the maids. It appeared that he had lied. When they were brought drinks, Ophelia noted that there was alcohol, and he was still underage, whether he could drink it. The young man replied that from time to time he drank with his father. Our heroine thought to herself that her word will not make the weather here. However, judging by the fact that the edges of Alexander's eyelids are slightly reddened, we can conclude that he is already drunk. When the young man said that it was time for him to go to bed, our heroine addressed him by the name Alexander, but the young man corrected her and said that Alex. It had been quite some time since her appearance in this mansion, so he wondered if she could call him that. Ophelia thought to herself she had no idea what the reason was, but lately, the young man's behavior did seem like he was trying to get closer to her. She's going to leave the duchy sooner or later anyway, then what's this all about? So our heroine apologized and replied that she wasn't ready to call him that yet. After a while, the guy remembered her words and thought about the fact that he even had to squeeze out tears from himself, which he did not have. It was going to be hard. Then he turned to the maid and said that he had not given her any orders. Then why did she make this circus? Henrietta replied that, after all, Ophelia's people were unmarried. If she were in such a position to listen to Mr. Adrian, she might fall for it. The young man replied that it was ridiculous. She is not like her mother. There's no way a sister would hang around a man's neck. That's why all his efforts had come to naught. No matter how fondly he tries to get close to her, the girl puts up a wall in front of him and pushes him away. It's not like she doesn't have a thought in her head. Since she was secretly going to leave the mansion late at night, there was definitely something she could rely on, however. What is it? After which he turned to the maid and told her to know her place. Let her not interfere or do anything stupid. The next day the maid came to our heroine and told her that the gentleman asked if she would not eat with him together, what to answer him. After thinking a little, the girl asked him to tell her that she was not hungry yet. Henrietta said that she had heard that she had not yet decided on her personal maid. The girl replied that, true enough, however, she felt uncomfortable having anyone serve her. The maid countered that she would need a maid someday. For example, when she needed to go out or something. Ophelia said that she used to have a maid with whom they were so close that they could talk in bed together. But the next day, her ruby necklace went missing, whereupon her mother kicked that girl out. However, when the necklace was still found, the maid was no longer in the house. She wanted the maid to come back, but her mother wouldn't let her. Then she added that she must be in a hurry, for Alexander was waiting for her. Henrietta said she would then relay her words to her master and go back. Suddenly, a young man appeared in her bedroom and told her sister that it was a bad habit to skip meals, after which he informed her that her uncle was planning to stay another day, whether she liked it or not. The girl replied that she didn't. The boy supported her and said he was not happy about it either, so let her come down with him. The maid informed the gentleman that my lady had accepted her as her personal maid. Ophelia thought to herself that she hadn't actually given her consent yet. The young man asked if she expected him to congratulate her. Our heroine noted that despite the fact that they are in her room, it feels like she is being pushed out of there like a third extra. Then she stood up and confirmed the words of the maid by touching the guy with her finger. Then added that there was no need to look at her with that bloodthirsty look. It seems that their uncle is waiting for them, so they should go. Alexander clasped their hands together and noted that this would be much better, and now they could head to the dining room. Downstairs, Adrian angrily noted that she'd been packing for a very long time. Does she really like to sleep late? Alexander noted that the relative seemed to be in a great hurry. The uncle replied that it was disrespectful to just sit and stare at such an appetizing meal. The young man said that he had mentioned that he was going to leave right after the meal. Was that correct? The man replied that he wanted to, but he thinks he should reconsider his plans. Adrian understands perfectly well what the lad might say to him to that effect. But let him look at her. Can he go back, leaving my lady here with such angelic eyes? Besides, it's just like his aunt said, and Alex is still too immature to run the affairs of the manor alone. The boy replied that he thought he had made it clear that Sister Ophelia would be more than enough. The man replied that did he really think some commoner wench had much intelligence? Well, if there's a husband to guide her, that's another story. The young man hissed that he was going overboard with his expressions and let him watch his language. The count turned to the girl and asked if she thought the same. Our heroine replied that it sounded a little rude. Adrian started to get angry and told her to look him in the eye and answer one question. What is the problem? Why can't he be her husband? Smiling, our heroine replied that the problem was her face and age. When Alex laughed loudly, the man exclaimed that is it funny to him now, then hissed that there is a limit to everything. Did she think she was part of the family? Our heroine replied that as far as she knows, he himself is a distant relative on the sideline. The man could not contain his emotions and began to call the girl foul language. The young man hissed for him to hold his face. Adrian is in the Duchy of Arpad, and this is not his territory. The lad no longer intends to tolerate his antics. Did he think the young man wouldn't recognize that he was going around and probing everything under the guise of a normal promenade? The count exclaimed, "What is he talking about? What kind of young people are they nowadays?" His mood was getting worse and worse, so that was enough. But Alexander asked a question that then, why he found documents with the annual income of the duchy in his room. The man immediately started screaming that he was framed. He swears he didn't take or sniff anything. Adrian exclaimed that Ophelia should know for sure. Let her remember him telling her that he had no interest in the duchy's property. The girl remembered him telling her that he was going to leave the mansion, but decided to stay a little longer since he hadn't been in these parts in a while. Don't let him think that. He has no interest in the state of the duchy. His own money is enough for him. Apparently, the man asked her such a question in order to get out somehow from the situation that might arise. So she apologized and replied that she did not remember. She thought to herself that the Count was actually right. He really did not take the documents, and all because she had put them in his room. The man shouted that the girl had lost her nerve. He was going to take her to be his lawfully wedded wife, not his mistress. She'd stabbed him in the back. Ophelia asked why he was angry with her. Had she done something wrong? The Count yelled that there was no need to play dumb. No one but her knows. The young man, on the other hand, ordered the servants to capture him immediately. Last night, when the documents were stolen, our heroine looked around and headed for the Duke's office. Of course, after the death of Duke Arpad, the door to the study was locked, and except for Alexander, no one could get in there. However, it was not some big problem for the girl, and she managed to get in there. Our heroine pored for a while in the books and found what she needed. The next steps were simple. All she had to do was to plant the stolen documents in Adrian's room. In the meantime, the Count was screaming that how dare she stomp him into the dirt. Ophelia muttered that it was too much. He considered her a candidate for his bride. She thought to herself that it was a good thing the estate was so large. She thought to herself that it was good that the estate was so big, and that no one ever went to the mansion late at night. The young man said that the Count was on his way home, so let them open the door for him. The man tried to explain that there was some misunderstanding, but no one listened to him. When the guy said, "Wait a second," Adrian immediately started saying it was the right thing to do. He, too, obviously smelled something wrong here, so he should kick this girl out as soon as possible. But Alexander asked that the carriage on which the Count arrived does not belong to the duchy. He replied that it did. This carriage was given to Lady Catherine a few years ago when she visited the Races estate. The young man stated that it was worth returning the loan then. The man cried out that then what would he use to get home? It would take a whole week to ride a horse from the estate. The young man smiled and replied that he didn't think it was his problem anymore. Adrian yelled that he would be sure to send the carriage back as soon as he got back to the manor, but no one was going to help him. When they were alone together, the young man asked his sister if he could find out the reason why she did that. Ophelia would obviously try to pretend now that she didn't know what it was about, but she had left something in the study, namely her hair. Then remarked, judging by her silence, catching her off guard, "I wonder what her next move will be." Our heroine replied that if he was talking about finding her hair in his office, it couldn't be. The study is always locked. Then how did she get in? Besides, he's the only one with a key, isn't he? This whole thing was really annoying him. The way she stretched out the end of her sentence, as if keeping the hint of doubt in her gentle voice. Absolutely everything leaves a reflection and constrains him. The first day they met was exactly the same. The moment her sister stepped out of the carriage, it was as if all the world's misfortunes had enveloped her. There was such a dangerously chilling atmosphere around her, to such an extent that she wanted to simply cling to her. Suddenly the girl broke the silence and asked if her hair was in the study. The boy thought to himself that her expression showed that she was absolutely sure that he was wrong. Maybe he really had gotten something wrong. But no, it can't be. The guy saw everything with his own eyes. Only he and the one who found the hair first knew what had happened. Ophelia told Alex to listen and added that she had no idea what he was talking about until the young man started connecting her to what had happened in the study. The guy replied that they would close the subject then. If she says no, then that's the way it is. It's just a little odd. His subordinates wouldn't pull something like that. Our heroine looked at him with puppy dog eyes and asked if that's why he decided to suspect her. Then she asked him if he really thought the servants were incapable of lying to him. Does he remember what happened a few days ago? Alex began to frantically remember everything that had happened. What does she mean? Maybe the time he brought her to his chambers to apply the ointment, or about the time they ran into each other in the library, where his sister didn't frequent in normal times. Or maybe about the time the young man had met her on the training ground. Afterward, he remembered the reason Ophelia had come to him. The girl said that she had been handed a girl with blonde hair, that Alexander had called for her, but there was no such thing. Then it dawned on the young man that it was all because of a servant girl named Henrietta. whereupon he ordered the butler to bring this maid to him immediately. The lad asked if it was she. The girl answered that it was, for she said she had found them in Mr. Adrian's room. The young man said that was not what he meant. He can't figure out if the girl is playing dumb or if she really doesn't know anything. The maid, on the other hand, lost his trust a long time ago. Some time ago, the father brought Henrietta and said that she was the daughter of his acquaintance. Due to some circumstances, the girl would now live with them. The man asked her if she was sure she didn't want to go to the academy. With her skills, she could become an excellent wizard. The little girl replied that she didn't want to. Besides, she is only the daughter of a bankrupt aristocratic family. A maid's job suits her. Her father did not understand why the girl refused to go to the academy and for what reason she began to do hard work as a servant. However, the young man understood from the beginning. It was all clear from the look she was looking at him with, so he said that Henrietta obviously understood everything perfectly well. Her duties include cleaning Sister Ophelia's chambers, so it was not difficult for her to pick up the loose hair and put it in the study. The girl is not a servant of Count Racis. Then why did she come to his bedroom? She replied that the Count had asked for her. Then she asked if the Lord suspected her. She spoke only the truth. The young man began to be pissed off by this whole situation because Ophelia is sitting and watching such an absurd picture. His sister finally began to call him Alex. However, in the current situation, the girl can once again alienate. He thought that everything would work out if he started digging a little deeper, but so far, nothing has worked out. Then told the tearful servant that he was free to go, and added that they would talk later when she had calmed down. Our heroine stood up and said she would be on her way. There was no reason for her to continue sitting around, and besides, she was already full. When the guy objected that she hadn't even touched the main course, Ophelia replied that British instant bread was more than enough for her in the morning. Alexander said that she had begun to lose weight since arriving at the duchy. He would watch her at dinner. Our heroine stated that, by the way, why push the man around so much? She would, if she were Henrietta, start with an excuse. The young man wondered if she was covering for her, for the maid could have made false accusations against her. Ophelia remembered how when she was a child, her maid would call for her eldest and show her the missing necklace. She had said she hadn't stolen anything. The girl was sure that my lady wanted to spite her, so she had deliberately hidden the pendant. The woman objected that the girl was probably just joking, but it was a lie. Our heroine did not want the maid to be reprimanded, so she hid the fact that it was she who stole the pendant. So she turned to the young man and replied that she was already used to it. After a while, Henrietta sobbed and thanked Ophelia. If it wasn't for her, the maid would have taken the blame like that. Honestly, the maid had accidentally found those documents and hadn't brought her hair into the master's study. Could she unfairly accuse the one who would very soon become a close person to her? Our heroine noted to herself that she had finally said it and declared that that maid who had stolen the pendant had been kicked out by her mother on purpose. The woman was afraid that she might do something to her. Henrietta thought to herself that she just couldn't believe it. Why on earth hadn't she realized anything before? The reason she was constantly disturbed by my lady was not because of the Lord's jealousy. Ophelia was a mage, too, and so powerful that she was no match for her. 3 years had passed since that time. A young man looked into her room and asked her if she was tired of looking at the same view outside the window. The girl wondered when she would see such snowfall again. She needed to see enough before she left. Alexander replied that she spoke as if she was going to leave the duchy right now. Her words hurt him. Let him think that if she leaves, her little brother will be all alone. There is an even more pleasant scent coming from her today. Did she apply some perfume on herself? The girl said he was out of line again. The guy is clearly very aware of this himself. What he thinks people will think of them. The young man replied that maybe that they were a very friendly brother and sister. It seemed that their estrangement with Alexander was a matter of the past day. In 3 years, they had become very close. Ophelia asked if he still read books like that. She wondered to herself if he was amused by stories of a child killing his own parents. When she gave him the book and said that he had unusual taste, the guy replied that such works excite. Our heroine stated that he does not protest in this way, but simply such a genre likes him. Suddenly, Alexander's button came off, and he said that he noticed that it was barely holding on when he zipped up. Eventually, it did come off. What should he do now in this situation, since Henrietta is now on vacation? Ophelia advised him to call Mago, and the young man asked who that was. The girl explained that it was a maid who had started working for them recently. The young man replied that there was no need. This case is not urgent, so then somehow sew it up. Our heroine sighed heavily and said that okay, she would help him. Noticing that Alexander began to take off his shirt, Ophelia asked if he brought other clothes to change. The guy answered why, because she had once said that he had a good body. The girl immediately blushed because she was sure he hadn't hurt her then. The guy asked why she was so embarrassed. There was nothing wrong with being brother and sister to take off their clothes in front of each other. Sewing up her shirt, our heroine decided to talk about the household in the mansion. So she asked if an engagement would not solve the problem. The young man asked if he was too young to think about marriage. She treats him like a child herself. She told him not to stay out late, not to drink alcohol or something else. The girl looked at him for an answer and continued sewing, almost stabbing her finger with the needle. Alexander immediately leaned over to her and stopped her, telling her to be more careful as she almost hurt herself. Suddenly, a butler knocked and asked if he could enter the room. The man opened the door and said that he had a guest from the capital. The young man smiled, said hello, and asked if he, such a nobleman, could come in. Putting on his shirt, Alex said that he thought he had already entered. Then why ask his permission now? The young man apologized and introduced himself, saying his name was Claude. There was no cause for concern. He is by no means a suspicious person. After which he showed a token. Alexander noted that it was a gold plaque with a drawing of a wolf, which means he is an influential person of the imperial family, an investigator of the first class. After which the cat said it was time to get down to business. He thinks that there is no one present who has forgotten the tragedy of the Arpad couple's carriage 3 years ago. On a road with a steep incline, the wheels of the carriage began to slip, resulting in a fall off a cliff. Surprisingly, however, the investigation revealed that what happened was not an accident, but an incident planned by someone. The man came to inform them that under the mask of an accident lay a premeditated murder. He then decided to summarize the results of the investigation. The fact of the carriage falling off the cliff is true. However, there is something suspicious. Someone deliberately spun the wheels, weakening them. Our heroine said that it would be very good if the culprit was found as soon as possible. The young man smiled sweetly and replied that he wished it himself. That's why he was working on it. According to the conclusion of the investigation, the carriage caught fire as a result of the friction created during the fall off the cliff. However, they may have seen some suspicious people that day. Ophelia replied that she slept late that day and did not recall seeing anyone who could be described as suspicious. The young man said that he would then like to ask one more question. Who does she think would dare to do such a thing? The girl replied that honestly, there were too many people who could fall under suspicion. About the previous Duke Arpad, she can't say anything, however. Her mother was hardly loved by everyone. On the contrary, she was surrounded by envious, jealous personages. Claude replied that, being the daughter of the dead Duchess, she was rather cold-blooded in her estimation. Our heroine looked at him and asked him what, if they had not, by chance, met somewhere before. The guy exclaimed that whether his facial features are so common, and after all, many people said he was handsome enough for an investigator. His heart pinched after being told by such a beauty. Ophelia laughed and said that he was a very nice gentleman. The young man thanked her for her praise. The girl stood up and said that since there were no more questions, it was time for her to go. The boy extended his hand to her and thanked her for her cooperation. Our heroine shook it in response and said that she would try to help in any way she could. Claude said that during the investigation, it is impossible to show personal interest, but her smile is really beautiful. After which he added that it was a bit of a hackneyed phrase. Ophelia objected that it was not, because it was always very pleasant to receive praise. Outside the door, the girl thought that it was no big deal. Everything ended 3 years ago. On the day of the tragedy, our heroine found a used medical syringe in the closet, after which she burned it. But anyway, to the investigation, it has nothing to do with it. Claude and everyone else shouldn't know the truth. She would keep her mother's secret. She met her brother in the hallway, who said that Ophelia looked like she was having fun. The girl noted to herself that from the look on his face, one could guess that he was still angry. Though for the master of the house, there was nothing wrong with getting married. A while ago, the guy had said that it was necessary to have a conversation with everyone in turn. Alexander objected that he, as the head of the family, did not consent. On what grounds is Claude going to start the interrogation at all? The young man apologized and said that the order of the imperial family was paramount to him, after which he added that Mr. Duke was clearly not yet ready to hold a conversation. Therefore, he should probably start with this beautiful lady. The young man darkened very sharply and replied that it was fine, as he had no other choice. Our heroine asked that did she really look cheerful, or maybe he just imagined it. The young man walked by and replied that his sister knew better. Ophelia didn't realize what that was even about. A while later, Mr. Investigator said that with the girls' efforts, they could exhale. Our heroine thought to herself that now it is clear why everyone is so tense. It turns out that it's about the unwanted guest. Out loud, she answered that she could understand it, because she herself is already used to such things. In her head immediately flashed memories of how everyone around her whispered that her mother had lost 3 husbands, and why she had come at all. The young man said that he had heard that after the Duke's coming-of-age ceremony was over, she would leave Arpad Manor. Then he asked if it was true. Our heroine replied that it was. The matter had already been discussed with her brother many times. Claude asked where she was going to go. The girl replied that she would like to travel through the Sacred Empire. The investigator noted that this was an excellent choice. One in particular would like to climb the Ladder of the Saints. Ophelia noted that in the Holy Empire, it is the most famous place. It is said that with each step, a person gets rid of sins. Would he like to visit there in order to purify himself? The boy answered that if he were a sinner, he would not be able to work as an investigator. To be honest, there are many more legends. There is a belief that a man and a woman will be bound forever if they climb the stairs holding hands. After which he asked if the lady happened to have a couple she would go up together. The girl wondered if it was her imagination, or if he was hinting that he wouldn't mind becoming that very couple. Claude replied that he didn't mean that, but since she thought so, he wondered what the answer would be. Ophelia replied that she was afraid she would only burden such a busy man. The guy asked if she was getting the idea that if he agreed, she would actually climb the stairs with him. Our heroine replied that he could interpret her words however he wanted. This whole conversation disliked Alexander very much. After a while, Ophelia got up from the table and said that it was already time for her to go, but the young man shouted for her to wait. The girl asked her younger brother what was the matter, since he had not yet finished the meal, or maybe she looked cheerful again. She understands that he was uncomfortable, but either way, Alexander overreacted. She's already got a lot on her mind because of the news of the murder, and he dares to say she's having fun. Actually, the sister could be angry too. The guy interrupts her and says his name is Alex. He doesn't like it when she calls him so formally. Ophelia got angry and yelled that is it really that important at this point. The brother replied that it was important to him. He agrees that he has crossed the line. However, she was the one who made him so stupid. The girl didn't listen to him when he tried to hold her back, begging her hundreds of times not to leave. How could she have such conversations with that man? Our heroine didn't understand why he was making that face, as if he was hurt by what had happened. During the past 3 years, they quarreled far more than once, but he always closed his eyes and said that nothing could be done. However, why did he have that agonized look on his face right now? Was it really because of the investigator? What does he even want from her? Then asked if he remembered that he had promised to let her go when he came of age. Alex wondered if another promise couldn't be made. Ophelia was outraged by this, and began to gibber quickly that if it had been that simple, she would have done so from the beginning. The young man put his arm around her and told her it was all right. Let her speak slowly and take her time. The girl abruptly began to remember how she found the syringe, and how her mother said that she promised that she would not do it again, but she deceived her. Our heroine asked him to stop, otherwise they too could fall under suspicion. The guy stated that now she is not worried about him, but about the investigator, whom she saw today for the first time. Ophelia told him not to overreact. Between ordinary brother and sister, such a thing is unacceptable. Alex asked that aren't they ordinary brother and sister? But the girl objected that enough. All these conversations bore her. She thought to herself that if they were not brother and sister, then who were? What does he want from her? Maybe to stop this game of brother and sister. The young man said she was very cruel. Despite the time they have spent together, the girl thinks he is so worthless. The girl replied that how worthless had she ever said such a thing? There was no need to distort the truth. She thought to herself that he had matured, but in the end, he was the same as 3 years ago. Maybe Alex's soul is still dwelling on the day of the funeral. His sister tried to calm him down and told him to stop shedding tears, to which the young man replied that he didn't want to. Ophelia said she didn't want to either, after which he asked what exactly. Our heroine thought to herself that she herself is not better. A moment ago she was boiling with anger, but it was worth it to see Alex crying, on whose eyelashes the tears had gathered. She thought how sweet it was. She then brushed away his tear and replied that she didn't want him to cry. But the guy objected that that wasn't true. She likes to see him like that. She is only gentle with him when he is in tears. Ophelia thought to herself that once again the subject had closed with herself, but it couldn't be helped. Anger mated in a flash. After which she said it was time to head for the rooms. At the moment is not the time to arrange verbal altercations. It is necessary to deal with the case of murder. I don't want the investigator to question her later, saying that she had brought the head of the Arpad family to tears. The young man immediately calmed down and replied that it was fine. Let it be as she wanted it to be. Then he walked her to her room. They said goodbye, wished each other good night, and the young man left. The girl waited for the young man to move farther away and walked back to the spot where they had been talking. Going down the stairs, she said that it was not in vain that she thought that some rat was eavesdropping on them. She then asked what about the vacation she had given Henrietta, since she was already back. The maid replied that it was just that the weather was bad, and there was nowhere to go. Ophelia stated that it was clear. She would consider this place her home even after her death. Since she had already arrived, she would rest and start work tomorrow. The maid thanked her and thought to herself that this was the last time she would look down on her. For the past 3 years, she had been developing her magical abilities with the help of the grimoires kept in the mansion. Milady will surely defeat her power, and then the Lord will look up to her again. Reflections were interrupted by Ophelia's voice, who asked what she was thinking about, maybe wanting to tell her something. Our heroine paid attention to her hand, which was sparking with magical energy. After that, she thought that she was like a mouse sneaking into the library because she and Alex were alone. In fact, it turned out that she was studying the grimoires that were there, and all this time she was preparing to take revenge. So grabbed her hand, saying she was covering her, and as she wished, left it by her side. Could this be her gratitude? Henrietta couldn't believe that Mistress had suppressed her strength in no time. How stupid she had been. She could have realized from the start that her level of magic was no match for her amount of power. Ophelia sat down beside her and said that when she left, this place would still be hers, so there was no need to fool around, after which she clarified if she understood her. The maid thought to herself that she had re-injected magic power into her body against her will, so Henrietta wouldn't be able to move for a while, but she could barely squeeze out that she understood. The next day, an investigator came to Ophelia, and she asked him what business he had come at such an early hour. The boy replied that he wanted to ask her something, but that he had been a bit tactless, so he had better come to see her at another time. The girl stopped the young man and said that everything was all right. Let him say what he had come for. She began to feel nervous that a couple of mishaps had happened last night. Maybe the investigator had accidentally seen her with Alex and Henrietta then, or maybe he'd noticed her using magic. But the guy replied that it wasn't really anything serious. He was only going to inquire about something concerning Mr. Duke. She should remember his first day at Arpad Manor very well. Since he has a month as an investigator, he can access all the rooms in the mansion. So, just recently, Claude had peeked into the Duke's bedroom. Although he was not comfortable with it, he still led him into the room. Opening one of the drawers, the guy discovered a very old diary. As soon as he was about to look at his entries, Mr. Duke threw him out into the hallway in no time. The expression on his face was so frightening that it looked like he might have killed someone at that moment. The investigator guessed that this diary was very important to him, but did she think his reaction was too violent? The girl thought to herself that, to be honest, Alex was really overreacting. He had asked her to keep it a secret that he kept a diary. Also, because of this very diary, he had kicked out of the investigator's room. So, there's something in the notes that his brother doesn't want to show anyone, what he's so insistent on hiding. So she answered that she thought that such a violent reaction is caused by the fact that the Duke is not used to someone interfering in his private life. Part of it is that diary. After that, she asked if he was heading somewhere. The young man replied that the weather was magical, so he was going to go to the countryside. Ophelia asked if he would like to inspect her resting place, since he had already come. The lad offered to postpone the search until next time, otherwise it would be too cavalier of him. After a while, the girl thought to herself that Alex said that reading was his hobby, and constantly followed her to the library like a tail. However, the absence of books in his chambers seemed strange to her. Now there is a diary, the contents of which he so carefully hides. What is the young man trying to hide? Near his room, our heroine saw the maid, and noted that the chambers are cleaned, the linen is changed. This means that no one will enter the bedroom until Alexander comes. Claude was away, her brother was at practice, and Henrietta was bedridden. The timing couldn't be better. so she sneaked into his room and immediately picked up the diary. When she opened it, she was surprised to find nothing written on the first page. But on the next page was written January 11th of the 295th year, according to the calendar of the Devon Empire. After which the inscription began to appear on its own, why she was peeking, a great many times. The girl didn't understand what it was, being a warning to someone who might read the diary. Alexander was just worried that Claude would get to the entries after all, or was it a warning to her? She then decided she was digging too deep and flipped the page, after which she exhaled that the back was fine. It said that on November 21st of the 291st year in the calendar of the Devon Empire, he had a new mother. She was as beautiful as an angel. Now he understood why his father had fallen in love with her at first sight. Behind the angel, stepmother was an O. The boy went over to greet her, but suddenly his heart began to pound frantically. In the end, he couldn't even say hello to her and returned to the mansion. The young man thought that he had caught some kind of disease, so he decided to visit the doctor. However, no abnormalities were found in him. He was completely healthy. Alexander did not understand what it was then. November 23rd of the 291st year in the calendar of the Devon Empire. Going down for lunch, he ran into O. Figured he was making her uncomfortable, so department away. Alex was going to say hello, but then he had a hard time doing it. Our heroine thought to herself that it was really just a diary. Then why was Alex so angry with Claude? He even gave such a frightening warning at the beginning. November 28th of the 291st year in the calendar of the Devon Empire. Today was the first time they had dinner as a family. During the meal, his heart pounded like crazy, and afterward, in an effort to calm it, the lad was inclined to sleep. Suddenness at the door divorced him. In the middle of the deep night, G came to him. She was up to her old tricks again. Despite the fact that summer was long gone, she stood in front of him in just her shirt and offered to sleep with her. Women like that made me sick. She hummed and thought to herself that Henrietta had indeed behaved like a mouse. Then she took a quick look at the rest of the pages, and it was the same, so she decided that she should put the diary back where it belonged. But suddenly, Ophelia realized that she had just noticed something strange. December 13th of the 291st year in the Devon Empire's calendar. For the first time in a long time, he decided to get into a carriage and explore the surroundings of their territories. As he rode, a certain feeling never left him. The wheels seemed to be loose. The young man looked at them, and suddenly a great idea came into his head. Our heroine was shocked, whether the incident with the carriage had something to do with him. Suddenly she heard footsteps and thought that whether Alex is coming back. It was necessary to hide, but there was nowhere to hide in this room. The girl quickly sat down near the desk and tried not to make a sound. Ophelia wondered why he was even back so early. What would happen if he noticed her? Afterward, as the young man began to undress, the girl noted that the situation had taken a critical turn. Noticing that the door to the bathroom was open, our heroine thought that he should go to wash soon. If she was careful, she could leave unnoticed. Then she wondered why the young man had such a displeased expression on his face. Maybe something happened in training. The Duke put his hand on his head and murmured our heroine's name thoughtfully. Ophelia wondered why he called her by her first name instead of saying sister. In fact, why he looked so haggard. When the guy finally left for the bathroom, the girl began to slowly make her way out of his bedroom. On the way, she noticed that the paper her brother had been looking at so intently had her image on it. After some time, Ophelia pondered on what to do. It might be worth a visit to Alexander's room today, for she had not read everything. More than anything, she wants to know what the great idea is. It's good that Claude is still in the village, but the problem is Alexander. If the same thing happens as yesterday, she might not be so lucky the second time. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and the younger brother asked if his sister was in her room. The girl thought to herself that pretending she wasn't there would make her even more suspicious. It's not a big deal, just need to stay calm. So she opened the door and asked what Alex was doing near her bedroom at such an early hour. The young man said that lately Ophelia started getting up earlier. Our heroine replied that it seems to her that she wakes up at the same time. After which she asked where he was going at such an early hour. The guy replied that he heard that the feudal workers had started snow removal, so he decided to go there. The girl immediately thought to herself that, in other words, her brother's room would be empty for a few hours. Then offered to come down together for her to see him off. The young man went about his business and waved goodbye to his sister. Ophelia pondered as she puzzled over how she would get to Alexander's chambers. She did not think that the problem would be solved so quickly. Our heroine could not believe that she was so lucky, but when she yanked the doorknob, it turned out to be locked. She wondered if Alex had ever locked the door, or if he'd gotten wind that she'd gone into his room. What to do now was unclear. Ophelia wouldn't be able to melt the lock like she did last time with the study. Suddenly, there was a young man who said the door wouldn't open that way. Had she not tried using the key, or was she going to melt the lock again? The girl couldn't believe what had happened. When had he even had time to come back? And his words in general put her in a stupor. How much Alex knows. After that, Alexander put the key in her hand and helped her open the door, while asking if she would come in. Ophelia didn't realize what she should do. Maybe, as if nothing had happened, to go inside. Our heroine had two questions in her mind. What was the purpose of him letting her in, and did he know about the diary? If not, she would try to get out of the situation somehow. The guy said she wasn't very careful this time. Her hair fell out, right under the desk. Will she say again that it was someone else's gamble? If not, then what was she so interested in since she decided to sneak into his room? Then he handed her the diary and told her to look at it. After all, it was the one she was so interested in anyway. Ophelia said she didn't want him to force himself to show her the entries. Alex replied that he guessed that was exactly what she would say. However, it didn't matter. Could he have any secrets from his sister? Alexander knew everything already when the investigator entered his chambers. Since he expected Claude to go to her and snitch, he was put out of the door. The girl stated that if he knew that she would enter his bedroom, that's why he wrote in his diary, "Don't peek." Alex replied that it was correct. The young man did not want his sister to look at the diary, but in the end, it was all to no avail. Our heroine replied that it wasn't useless, since she hadn't read everything. The Duke exclaimed that it could not be so. Ophelia replied that, seriously, what was the point of her lying? Then it dawned on him that she most likely heard him say her name, as she was hiding under the table at the time. Our heroine replied that that was right. He had said her name, and she had heard it. The guy grabbed his head and mumbled that it couldn't be. He then began to beg her to forget everything that had happened. Ophelia replied that she would think about it. She noted to herself that of course she had not thought of such a thing, but since the owner of the diary had given permission, there could be no reason to refuse. December 15th, 291st year on the calendar of the Devon Empire. Eating alone with O was as hard as he thought it would be. A lump rose in his throat from excitement, so he decided it would be best to avoid eating together for a while. Our heroine remembered that day, for it was then that her mother had gone on her wedding journey. She then revealed the moment when their parents' accident occurred. In the afternoon, he heard the news of the carriage accident. What had happened was like a dream. The stepmother died on the spot, and the father was rushed to the hospital, but the man never opened his eyes. Immediately after the incident, an investigation was launched. According to investigators, the carriage wheel flew off, which eventually led to a fall from the cliff, but something seemed strange to him. The young man remembered exactly that the wheels had recently been replaced with new ones. Our heroine exclaimed that if the wheels had indeed been changed, then what was the point of that phrase? A great idea. Then found this moment in the diary, and read that he looked at the weakened wheels and had a great idea. The young man asked if he had to answer. Ophelia said of course he did. Did he really want her to suspect him? The young man replied that under the pretext of changing the wheels, he was going to look around the neighborhood with his sister. Our heroine asked if he was joking. The boy exclaimed that it was true. Doesn't she remember? He suggested that she go out for a walk together. The guy reminded her that he had come to see her and said that she must really like sitting in four walls. Didn't she think a walk would do her good? But the girl replied that she didn't want to go anywhere in this cold. Ophelia thought to herself, who even calls for a walk like that, as she could understand. The young man added that in those days he was extremely inexperienced, but now it must be different. The girl shouted that wasn't the problem, whether he even imagined it was, but she didn't finish and thought to herself that she suspected him all the time. Why all the time hanging around her? Why trying to get closer? She had no idea what Alex really wanted from her. However, she couldn't imagine that he was so inexperienced. It was only after reading the diary that Alexander's actions made sense. They and himself did not realize that he fell in love with her at first sight. Then he decided to read on. December 18th, 291st year. Last night, O had secretly tried to leave the mansion, but he still couldn't let her go. She knew something about what had happened anyway. As he was confusedly tidying up his father's office, he saw a syringe in the bookcase. Ophelia was horrified at how he could have found it, since she had burned everything. The boy put his hand on her shoulder and told her not to stop. He certainly doesn't want her to read, but at the same time, he wants his sister to read the diary to the end. December 27th, 291st. He wanted to kill A for carrying on nonsense without knowing his place. Then he found a silver hair in his office. Is O guilty? He hopes he is deluded. The girl said she didn't want to read anymore. The boy replied that it was too late and they had gone too far. April 11th, 294. He admits that he loves O like a man. It was clearly love at first sight. That alone could explain the rapid beating of his heart. July 16th, 294th. The boy recognized the cause of the accident. The bundle of wheels had been melted. July 17th, 294th. It had something to do with the lock in the office being melted. Could it be a G? July 20th, 294th. G was crying to him and all of a sudden asked for a vacation. Maybe she's lost her mind. I guess it wasn't G's fault. August 4th, 294th year. I wonder if O is a magician. Did G tell the truth or was it a lie? September 28th, 294th year. The cause is unknown, but it seems that O is the culprit. Only he should know about it. September 29th, 294th. I wonder if O is really the culprit. Then he must be in love with the girl who killed his father. November 30th, 294th year. O keeps emphasizing the fact that the day of her departure is only a short time away. December 7th of the 294th year. No, the guy can't let her go. December 23rd, 294th. He doesn't care whether O is guilty or not. December 26th, 294. Therefore, he really asks for her to be there for him. December 28th, 294th year. He begs very much not to leave him. January 5th of the year, 295. In the 2 weeks that remain before his coming-of-age ceremony, he must think of a way to keep the O. Our heroine poked at his journal and thought to herself that Alexander suspected her. For 3 years, he'd believed her to be the murderer of his father and her mother. Afterward, she asked that in spite of all this, did he really continue to love her as a man? Could love be conceived under such circumstances? Then the girl stood up and shouted loudly that it wasn't her. How could he even think such a thing about her? The young man asked her to calm down and told her that he in no way wanted her tears. It was not part of his plans. The investigator just showed up and he couldn't continue to hide his feelings. Ophelia screamed that. Was that why he suspected her? Was that why he read books where a child killed his parent? Moreover, right in front of her nose, as if for show. The guy's really tough. Until now, he had tried to hint that he knew the truth and wanted her to notice it. When the young man tried to take her hand, the girl pushed him away and screamed at him not to touch her. Now she understood why he wanted to keep her near him. He must have wanted her dead, or was trying to find evidence that would prove her involvement. The young man tried to explain that it was not so, but our heroine did not listen to him and said, "Stop, she's had enough." She thought to herself that it's not just about suspicions. She tried her best to keep her mother's secret. The woman was like a butterfly. If you reach out to her, she'll fly away. Therefore, in order not to remain abandoned, Ophelia made a huge amount of effort. Our heroine tried for the sake of her mother, who so badly covered her tracks, and in the end, all her efforts fell into oblivion. After which the girl said that it was time to stop and began to walk away from her brother's room. Alexander grabbed her hand and asked her to listen to him. Did she not understand anything after reading his diary? Our heroine asked what else she needed to hear. The young man asked if she really believed that he wished her to be executed. Ophelia asked her to let it go and said that she didn't care what he thought. The boy replied that he couldn't let her go. Magic energy immediately started to build up in her hand, and she said that she should have let her go when the girl offered nicely. Alex asked that if he didn't let her go, would his sister attack him? Our heroine couldn't believe that he was so quick-witted, so she replied that she didn't know. It all depended on his action. The guy asked if she wanted to kill him. Ophelia replied that there was no need to worry. She wasn't going to kill him. All she wanted to do was to hit his cheek with a stinging palm. Alexander placed her hand on his cheek and replied that it was fine. If that was her wish, even if it would be his doom, he would accept anything from her. Our heroine shouted that she was serious and let him let her go. Alex replied that he was serious too. Ophelia in the end did not start to do anything. Then the young man stated that he knew she would not hurt him. She had stolen the documents too, after all. At first, he thought it was some kind of intrigue, so he closed the subject without too much noise. Then he needed a pretext to kick Count Racis out of the estate. Our heroine replied that, knowing the truth, he had pretended to be deceived. She thought to herself that she believed that no one knows. Alex did not catch her red-handed, but nevertheless he realized that it was she who had stolen the documents. Afterwards, she asked the young man what about the syringe. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about. Ophelia asked him not to play dumb, and added that she was talking about the syringe he had found in the office. The young man asked if it wasn't the one his father used to inject himself with supplements. The girl wondered if he really thought so. Alex asked if it mattered. She doesn't want to share the truth with him anyway. Our heroine noted to herself that therefore the brother just wanted to pretend as if he did not know anything. Because Duke Arpad, with his excellent health, did not need any supplements. After which she asked how much he already knew. The lad wondered that if he told, would anything change? Our heroine whispered that she did not kill her mother. Alexander embraced her and replied that it was okay. It didn't matter to him anymore. Whether she did or not, he didn't care. Then he added that he would kiss her in 3 seconds. If she didn't want to, she could slap him on the cheek. Ophelia thought to herself that even though he said that, his hands were shaking because he was afraid of hearing rejection. But she did not have time to answer anything, because the young man pulled her to himself and kissed her hard. When our heroine returned to her bedroom, Henrietta noted that her lipstick on her lips had been rubbed off, so she asked where my lady was returning from. The girl replied that it was from Alexander. The maid was taken aback at hearing this information and asked if she had spent the whole night with him. Henrietta had been skilled in magic since she was a child. One couldn't call her skills outstanding, but she could handle a mid-level night quite comfortably. However, the abilities that the maid had been so confident in, Ophelia had trampled on. She first began to worry on the night of the Arpad couple's funeral. She was going to comfort the Lord as he was left all alone, and sitting on his bed, waited for him to return. The girl pondered the fact that Alexander was having a very hard time right now, but the strange thing was that it was already late, but he was still gone for some reason. When the maid went to the window, she saw the Lord and my lady talking about something. The maid knew that Ophelia was about to leave, but why was the young man now by her side? Why was he leading her back to the mansion? One day, she found documents that should have been in the Duke's study. Why were they under Mr. Adrian's bed? Henrietta realized something when she found the papers in Count Racis's chambers, which she had inadvertently entered. This could be her lucky chance. For her, who was always tidying up my lady's room, it was the easiest thing in the world to extract her hair and leave it in the study. But she was mistaken when she thought that in this way she could drive Ophelia out of the mansion. The girl told her that that maid who stole the pendant, her mother threw out on purpose. She was afraid that our heroine could do something to her. It was at that moment that it became clear to her that she was a magician, which Henrietta is not even a match for. So she decided to become stronger. Every night for 3 years she studied grimoires and at the same time pretended to try to please her mistress. The maid couldn't believe that her magic was so vast. With such power, she would be able to surpass my lady. However, what greeted her upon her return to the manor, full of hope, was the master literally sobbing in Ophelia's arms. The girl could not believe if this was definitely the Alexander she had been serving for so many years. His God-given pride and nobility, his cold as snow gaze, and his graceful movements. She had fallen in love with this beauty, and for a long time had kept in her heart feelings for the Lord. Now she saw him crying desperately beside another. Henrietta had gone through so much to be in the mansion. She wanted to get close to him, at least for a while, so she rejected the Duke's help and began working at the Arpad estate as a maid. The girl endured ridicule from the other maids, who whispered that the Lord was only showing kindness, and she already thought she was someone else. There were even rumors that Henrietta had shown up at the young man's chambers and he had kicked her out the door. For the moment, the Alexander she knew was not the Alexander she knew. He had never once looked at her, never listened to her excuses, and now he was crying like a child on my lady's breast. Did the young man even know what she had to do for him? What should she do now, she thought quietly, to attack my lady when she was asleep? But judging by the situation, Ophelia must be with her mistress right now. But the mistress noticed her and said she covered her, and as she wished, left her by her side. Could this be her gratitude? All her efforts that she had put in for 3 years were trampled in an instant. Their powers were incomparable. The magic that Ophelia had forcibly brought back consumed her entire body. For days, the sickness confined her to her bed. She couldn't even get a decent night's sleep. A senior maid burst into her room and shouted how much longer she was going to lie in bed. Did she know how many days it had been? Stop being lazy. She was already getting paid more than the others. Henrietta knew that this could happen one day, as the Lord had a soft spot for my lady. As it was in her case, the young man fell in love with her at first sight. She thinks that all the servants standing at that place sensed some mysterious atmosphere between the two of them. The master tried to pretend to ignore Ophelia, but it was useless. When they happened to run into each other in the corridor, he would involuntarily stop and watch my lady until she disappeared from his sight. The servants whispered that there was something between them. The situation became even more serious after the Duke's death. The boy objected that they were brother and sister. The girl replied that Ophelia was not in the family register. Therefore, the Lord can accept her as mistress of the duchy. Every day the situation was getting more and more heated, but she wanted to believe that all these rumors were groundless. The girl thought to herself that the young man still suspected my lady, and in order to check her, he needed her. Alexander had often summoned her to ask her to follow Ophelia's movements. The maid was overjoyed at the thought that he needed her. Even though she hadn't thought things would get so complicated, she still made the right decision by melting a bunch of carriage wheels. Of course, it was a shame that the Duke had passed away, but if it made the Lord need her more, she was content. But when my lady returned in the morning with lipstick wiped off on her lips, the maid couldn't believe she'd been with Alexander all this time. When did they ever get so close? It wasn't like she planned to continue staying at the Arpad Manor. On the way, the girl mumbled to herself about what they had been doing all night with the Lord. Since she was about to leave, she wouldn't let it linger. But suddenly, she met the young man in the corridor. The maid noted that his shirt was unbuttoned. But why? For he always wears it neatly buttoned. Henrietta said hello to him and told him they hadn't seen each other for a long time. But the boy walked past her as if not noticing. She started to follow him and asked if anything had happened during her absence. Maybe he needed something, but the guy didn't respond. Then she added that there seemed to be a misunderstanding. So the one who melted the carriage bundle was her, not Lady Ophelia. Therefore, let him punish her. Let her report that she was the culprit who killed his parents. She thought to herself that she didn't want to be abandoned. She's been trying her best to be patient all this time. Even if he hates her, it doesn't matter. Henrietta wants him to be by her side until the end. That's why she screamed for him to imprison her by himself. Let him stare at her right up to the point where her head would fly off her shoulders. The young man looked at her and asked if this was really the way she wanted to get his attention. The girl began to mumble that it was true. Let him believe her. It was she who had melted the bundle of wheels. But the master called the servants and ordered Henrietta to be taken away immediately. The maid begged to hear her out and cried out that it was true. Let him just let her be near him. But the lad answered nothing. After a while, an older woman came into her room and asked her what she was even doing. Everyone around her is busy, only she alone has plenty of time. No more sitting around doing nothing. Let her clean up the investigators' quarters. The girl did not answer anything and thought only that the gentleman did not believe her. He asked her if this was her way of getting his attention. Of course, the young man's words were unfair, but perhaps he had decided to give her a chance. Let the young man rather believe that she could not be a criminal. When the maid abruptly took off and went somewhere, the woman shouted where she was even going. The girl replied that she had said she had to clean up after all. The older woman shouted after her that she had to be done for the day. It's snowing, so there aren't enough hands. And if she hung around doing nothing, she'd be left without dinner. Henrietta wasn't in the mood to work, but it couldn't be helped, so a start must be made on the investigator's room. In the room, she noted that he only looked decent. He doesn't know how to keep order at all. The desk and floor were in complete chaos. Then she noticed that there was a sheet of paper under the table and decided to pick it up, because Claude wouldn't be looking for it. But reading what was written there, Henrietta recognized some interesting information. On the way, the maid thought about the fact that she finally had an opportunity. Who would have thought that she would get her hands on something like this? This leaf would change everything. If the Lord saw it, he would look in her direction again. But suddenly some stranger appeared behind her back and started hitting her over the head with a rock. Someone started knocking loudly in the room where Ophelia and Alexander were. The girl asked what had already happened since early morning. The guy replied that he did not know, since he had not called anyone. The young man came out and asked what had happened in the first place. The butler apologized and said it was an emergency. According to the servants who were shoveling snow outside, Henrietta's breathless body was found in the back of the mansion. The boy asked if the investigator had already arrived. The man replied that he had only sent people to fetch him. Alexander said that he would now pack up and come to the scene. Ophelia asked if the maid was really dead. The guy replied that it was necessary to go down in order to find out for sure. Our heroine could not believe her ears. She was alive yesterday. Who could have killed her? Anyway, she hadn't done anything to be killed for. The young man replied that others hated her, however. Catching a criminal was the job of an investigator, so the sister should stay and rest. But the girl objected that she also wanted to go along with the young man. Alexander said that there was a corpse lying there. This picture can shock her. Ophelia replied that it's all right. She does not want to wait alone. At the scene, the young man asked if the investigator had come. The butler replied that he was on his way. Alexander muttered that it was an unfortunate joke. The murder happened right at the scene of the investigation. A guy suddenly appeared and asked everyone to step back. The crime scene must remain untouched, so have everyone stand back. Duke asked if he had contacted his colleagues. The young man replied that they said they would arrive a little later. Don't worry, they won't have to wait long. It would be best for everyone to go inside first. We also need to move the body. Is there anyone who can help? The young man immediately told the two servants to help the investigator and ordered the rest to return to the mansion now. Suddenly, one of the subordinates reported that the maid was holding something in her hand. The investigator immediately began to try to unclench her hand, and he succeeded, but with difficulty. The young man then stated that it was a torn piece of paper. However, it is impossible to tell from it what exactly was in the victim's hand. Either part of the paper was taken by the perpetrator, or the scrap of paper is not important evidence at all. We need to bring the body inside first. Then asked who first discovered the corpse, and began to question the young man under what circumstances he found it. Our heroine thought to herself that it was somehow strange, that familiar smile and the raised corners of his lips. She felt like she'd seen him somewhere before, but maybe she was just imagining it. Her thoughts were interrupted by Alexander, who said that it was cold outside today, so they'd better get inside soon. The young man, however, kept his gaze on them as they walked back to the mansion. Listening to the investigator ask what the man who discovered the corpse was doing last night, our heroine began to remember what she and Alexander were doing. She and the young man were reading books in his room, talking, looking at the sunset. Then, cuddled together, they lay in bed, and at some point a sound sleep came over her. All through the late night, she was plunged into a deep sleep, and afterward, near dawn, she opened her eyes and felt someone's presence. Then she ran her gaze into Alexander, who was looking at her tenderly. It became clear that Henrietta had died late at night, and she had been asleep at the time. Where was the young man then? Why had he awakened at dawn, and whether he had slept at all that night? The investigator says he realizes they are all shocked by the maid's death. However, he thanks them for their time. The first guy to start with is the Duke. What was he doing around 1 o'clock in the morning? The lad replies that, isn't it obvious he was sleeping, of course? When asked if he was alone, Alexander replied that he was with his sister. Those present began to whisper that since they were together at night, it was obvious. The young man clarified whether the Duke was telling the truth. Our heroine answered that yes. Then he turned to the butler and asked what about him. The man replied that he supervised the work of servants who were engaged in cleaning a separate building of the estate. The boy asked if he remembered their names. The butler replied that Brandon, Chris, Daniel, and Henry. The investigator asked if he remembered what time it was at the time. The man replied that, unfortunately, his pocket watch had broken, so he could not tell him the exact time. He then turned to the older maid and asked what she had been doing. The woman replied that she had quickly finished with her chores and was resting in her room. The young man noted that since she was alone in the room, it would be difficult to confirm her alibi. Moreover, he heard that she was not on the best of terms with the murdered woman. Whether that was true. The elder objected that there was nothing strange about being alone in a room at such a time. Besides, Henrietta was hated not only by her, but by everyone in the room. She had a nasty temper. When asked if everyone else thought so, the guys said they did, but they didn't hate her to the point of killing her. She's a mage, so there would be a lot of trouble if they touched her thoughtlessly. Our heroine noted that she had heard a lot of testimony about the maid, as well as entertaining stories she didn't know about. It turns out that her life was not so simple. Meanwhile, the investigator concluded that only the butler and the head maid had unconfirmed alibis. The evidence showed that it was the woman who disliked Henrietta the most. The maid was indignant that he meant to say he only suspected her. She really hadn't done anything. The young man replied that it was not only her. Until the matter was cleared up, he was obliged to suspect everyone present in the manor. After that, he asked Mr. Duke if he could borrow the reception hall from him. The lad wants to question some of the suspects again. The young man replied that was fine, but in return he asked to let them go at last. The investigator laughed amiably and said that he understood him. However, at the moment he could not do so. On the way, our heroine asked if Alex thought they were too close to each other. The young man pressed against her and said that he apologizes if she does not like it. Afterwards, he asked if she was afraid of other people's gazes. The girl replied that she was not, since it had been so long. Alexander said that he was glad, however, why she was avoiding his gaze. Ophelia replied that she wasn't. She was just a little tired. Her brother said they should go to their room then. She needed a good rest today. Our heroine objected that it was still only noon. The young man replied that in that case, they could read books together in the library. The girl wondered why he was so calm. Did Henrietta's death mean absolutely nothing to Alexander, as if he knew it would happen? When the guy took her by the hair, Ophelia asked him not to interfere since she was reading. The guy objected that it wasn't fair. She was hurting his feelings. Our heroine then stood up and said she was uncomfortable. His thighs were too firm for the pillow. The young man exclaimed that he now felt guilty to her for being in good physical shape. She thought to herself that she was good at pretending to be unfazed. It wasn't so easy in front of Alex, though. Then she said that she would go now. She had to take a bath and go to bed. Then she thought again that now she would have to bathe alone since the maid had died. The deaths of people around her had always been like this, but she still couldn't believe it. Even when her mom died, she thought that now the door would open. A woman would come inside holding a bag of gifts. Then she would hug her and ask if her daughter missed her mom. But the dead don't come back. Now only memories are the only way to face them, to talk to them, to feel their warmth. Alex asked what she was thinking about at the moment. The girl answered that she was thinking about the fact that now she would have to wash alone. The young man asked, "What do you mean alone? She can't see him or something." The girl replied that she could only see the Duke, who was filled with lustful thoughts. When our heroine touched his cheek with her hand, the guy noted that she is so tender and it is very pleasant. Could he come to her chambers today? Ophelia replied that she thought it would be better for them to sleep separately tonight. Henrietta was dead after all, so it felt a little wrong for them to be together right now. Besides, she liked him a lot. The young man asked why it mattered. He doesn't want to worry about some liar. When the girl replied that she was worried, the guy started to get angry and said that regrets won't change anything. There's no point in telling himself now that if he had known this would happen, he would have treated her more affectionately. Our heroine replied that she understood everything. Alexander asked that if she understands, then why she pushes him away again. His sister always does that to him. As soon as he starts to feel that he is reaching out to her, she immediately builds a wall between them. Ophelia asked why all this talk. Does he want to fight, or what? Alexander replied that he didn't. Does he really look like someone who wants to quarrel with her? And our heroine did not realize what that threatening look was. It's like he's looking straight into her soul. Even though she knows her brother won't hurt her, for some reason, a feeling of discomfort keeps her in her gut. But can she even be sure of that? Where is the guarantee that this is the case? The young man then said that they would call it a day then. He realized that his sister wants to be alone. However, he would like her to call things by their proper names from now on. No need to bring up the name of innocent Henrietta as an excuse. Then the young man started to leave her room. The girl wanted to stop him, but Alexander did not listen to her. After a while, Ophelia lay and thought about the fact that they had slept together for only 2 days. Right now, she couldn't even believe that she was alone in bed right now. It was causing so much pain. Suddenly, someone sneaked into her room and abruptly started strangling her. The girl didn't realize what was going on, or who it even was. Who is trying to kill her? She really didn't want to die. She did not want to part with her life without knowing who the culprit was. So she grabbed his head and started to influence him with magic. The girl thought that if she reached him one more time, she could completely disarm him. But because of the forced release of magic, everything was blurred in front of her eyes. She was sure that this male voice was familiar to her, but who was it? After which she lost consciousness. Waking up abruptly in the morning, Ophelia began to wonder if it was a dream. It seemed to her that during the night someone tried to strangle her, but when our heroine ran to the mirror and saw the bruises on her neck, she was convinced that it was reality. So why hadn't she sensed the hostile aura beforehand? Who dared to do such a thing to her? Since she had burned part of his face, he would definitely not be unharmed. The girl, by all means, must find the culprit before he finishes what he started. Suddenly, our heroine coughed and blood flowed from her mouth. She did not realize what it was, whether it was the consequences of magic. Unlike ordinary mages who need to learn spells, she does not need to do so. She can safely use magic with strong spiritual concentration. Yesterday, she couldn't concentrate, so she used magic as she went along. However, she shouldn't do it anymore, or she will fulfill the will of the assassin herself. She must find the person who dared to attack her, even if it means ransacking the whole house. After a while, Ophelia asked the butler where Alexander was. The man replied that his lordship had gone to the village early in the morning on urgent business. She then asked where Mr. Claude was. The servant replied that the investigator said that he finally managed to contact his colleagues, so he left even earlier than Mr. Our heroine reflected that the criminal had a low voice, reminiscent of one of these two. About Claude, she does not know, but it was very similar to Alex. The young man believes she killed his father, and besides, they had a big fight last night. Then she asked if anything strange had happened. The man said he only saw the owner and the investigator leaving the estate. He knew nothing more. The girl resented that since he was the butler, whether the man knew anything at all. When he called her mistress and began to mumble something inaudible in an attempt to clarify the situation, Ophelia exclaimed that now he was treating her like a mistress. She then warned him to be careful. The maids whispered that she wasn't herself today, but they decided it was better to keep silent, so as not to get caught in the hot hand. Our heroine thought to herself that instead of sitting in place and getting angry, she should take the initiative and find the killer first. The girl started walking around and questioning everyone if they had seen a man with a lesion on his face. Some answered that they hadn't. Some said that they were sometimes maimed during practice, but no one had been injured recently. Ophelia wondered if there was even a point to such questioning. Servants, with whom she has no ties, simply can't encroach on her lives out of the blue. As our heroine approached the library, the maid exclaimed that she was going to clean it up. Perhaps she should come again this afternoon. The girl replied that there was no need. She then asked if she had heard of anyone injuring their face lately. The maid replied that she had not heard. She then asked if there were any servants who had taken a vacation. The servant replied that the investigator had forbidden them to take vacations for a while, so everyone was at the mansion. Ophelia remarked to herself that she knew it. How stupid she was. After all, she had already guessed who the culprit might be, but because she didn't want to believe it, she was now combing the mansion from top to bottom. She then decided to go to the very spot where Henrietta had died the other day. I wonder if the maid is even aware that she almost died in ignorance like she did, and most likely at the hands of Alexander. She was about to go back to her room when she saw that only in one place the snow was blowing up in a hill. The girl thought that someone had gathered the snow in a pile on purpose and immediately began to stir the snow with her hand. After that, she saw a part of the face of the person who was hiding under it. Our heroine only had time to think that if he was waiting for her there for so long, as the criminal immediately grabbed her by the throat. Our heroine realized that she was wrong. The one who had attacked her in the night was not Alexander. Despite the fact that she felt it earlier, she still did not understand where she could see him before. The guy, on the other hand, had stated that she had been able to find him. Did she like his gift? Ophelia was having a very hard time breathing and felt like her neck was about to just explode. The young man went on to say that he wanted to scare her, but she was sleeping without her back legs. Then he let her go and said that he was the one who finished off that brainless maid and attacked her. Suddenly, the girl's mouth was bleeding again. She noted to herself that this was a side effect of the unwise use of magic. The investigator, on the other hand, offered to tell her that she hadn't originally planned to get rid of the maid. However, she had found out who she really was. That was why he had to eliminate her. That girl was just crazy. If she had sat still, she would have stayed alive. Our heroine noted to herself that he is the most real psycho. She cannot believe that the guy killed Henrietta because of this. The young man took her face and asked her if she found it funny. Does she think it's funny? Whether she still didn't realize what was going on. Ophelia wanted to start affecting him with magic, but for some reason she couldn't use it. Claude immediately grabbed her arm and exclaimed that she was going to use that damned magic again. She wouldn't be able to do it today. He was a little hasty yesterday, but now he brought something. It's an anti-magic pendant. She should know what it is. A piece of jewelry that can block magic. Our heroine noted that he was well prepared. Then she asked him what he was doing all this for. The young man asked if she knew Sir Cameron, then added that, judging by her face, she remembered. Though it's hard to forget it all. The man had been her papa for a while, but he was also his father. Ophelia thought to herself that the crazy man really does look her age. Is it possible to be an investigator of the first rank at that age? She should have hesitated back in the beginning. She was acting too careless, and was fixated on Alexander. The young man grabbed her shoulder and wondered to himself what he should do with her now. She was the reason his father had died an agonizing death. Therefore, she could not be quietly sent to the other world. The girl apologized and said that neither she nor her mother had heard that the man had a son. The investigator replied that it was understandable. He can't even call him father, because he's illegitimate. Immediately after his birth, he was sent to an orphanage. His mother couldn't raise him because of her situation. All this time, only his father visited him. Sometimes he brought him clothes or pocket money. At that time, he was very happy because he could see him somehow. But then he stopped coming to see him because he married her mom. He was abandoned because of the two of them. At first, he thought there was nothing he could do about it. The guy had come into the world as an unwanted child anyway. However, then it seemed strange to him. Why should he have to live like this? Why should he have to endure this pain? The young man thinks it's not fair. It's all very angry. She must think the same way. Our heroine, on the other hand, thought only that she must tear off his necklace by any means necessary. She'd have to find the right moment and grab the pendant. So she said no. She didn't think so. Suddenly, Claude covered his face with his hands and began to shout loudly that he would never forgive. He repeated these words in a circle. The girl did not understand what was happening to him and decided that it was necessary to run away before he became even more angry. But Ophelia had no time to take a step before the young man grabbed her arm. The young man hissed that he had grown up without a father and had become like that. Only she has the right to a happy and rich life. Our heroine, on the other hand, it seemed to our heroine that he was about to tear off her wrist, so she thought of nothing better than to bite him hard on the arm. Blood immediately flowed from the wound, and the investigator muttered that she does not even let him play, after which he grabbed her throat again and said that he would surely finish her off this time. What could a great mage like her do now? Let her just die peacefully at his hands. Suddenly, Alexander appeared behind his back. The young man sharply stuck his sword at him and said that he was late, after which he said that for this he could not be forgiven. Our heroine did not understand how she could confuse so sweet voice with the voice of Claude. Suddenly, the investigator grabbed him by the leg and began to shout that he would finish absolutely everyone. But the young man silently once again stuck his sword in his back. Noticing that our heroine was staring at him intently, the criminal shouted that you do not need to look at him like that. The girl came up to him, sharply ripped off the pendant. After which she added that she wondered who was going to die now. When she was a little over 10 years old, her mom became Cameron's wife. At that point, her stepfather was part of a knight's troop, so he was often away from home. Mama would tour the feudal lands in place of her busy husband, as it was one of her favorite things to do, and Ophelia knew full well that the woman did not want anyone else's interference. All she could do as she watched her mother going for a ride on her horse was pray that she would come back again. Mother said she would ride the horse for a while and come back. Everything would be all right, and she would surely come back. Our heroine thought to herself that if she obeyed her mother, she would never leave her. If she sits quietly at home, the woman will definitely come back. When she was once again left alone, she sat on the swing, which was in one corner of the garden, and trembled with anxiety. That day she met a little boy and did not understand who he was or how he had come to be there. The little boy asked why she was crying. Ophelia replied that he had imagined it. The boy objected that her eyes were red, and the expression on her face is not particularly happy. When our hero replied that she was happy, the stranger threw her a plum and said that, in that case, she was jealous. The girl replied that for the fruit, of course, thank you, but it was somehow suspicious. The boy was indignant and replied that if she didn't want it, then let her give it back. After the boy gave her that sour plum, her wariness went away. They immediately became friends, as befits children. One of the games they enjoyed most was hide and seek. The boy hid so well that he left no trace behind him. He always ended up in unexpected places, so after searching the whole house, She quite often got tired and gave up. One day, the mother came into her room and asked what kind of child it was in the first place. When the boy ran away, the woman asked where this vagrant had come from. The daughter also, of course, gives. If she starts taking such children, then there will be no end to them. Ophelia thought to herself that he was not a vagrant. The kid lives in the neighborhood and just often came to play with her. Because her mother was more important to her than the boy at the time, she held back the words she wanted to say and naturally erased that child from her mind. Afterwards, she said that there was a reason why she thought it was all strange. From the very first meeting, his face had seemed familiar to her. Could it be that he had been looking for her since she was a child? At that time, she was too unsophisticated. After a while, however, she realized how many suspicious things were right in front of her nose. Since Cameron's mansion was located on a hill, there couldn't be any neighbors. Now she could see the reason why he was hiding in secret from everyone. He wanted her to recognize him for herself. However, what to do? Before the guy himself revealed his true identity, she couldn't even remember who he was. Now the guy's face had become very similar to his father. She remembered the terrified look on Cameron's face, who had cursed her and her mom right before his death, lying in bed due to illness and being unable to even lift his arms. Afterward, she asked him that when he had come to their house as a child, if she had been his target. Most likely, he just wanted to see his father, making up a game of hide and seek as an excuse. How exciting it was for him to walk through their house. He apparently hoped his father would recognize him if he ran into him. When the young man tried to grab her dress, the girl said his tricks were useless. Alex put his arm around her and asked if she was okay. Our heroine asked if he could wait a little longer. There was something else she would like to tell him. Claude can rejoice, because this is the first and last time she found him. Alexander tried to stop her, but the girl was very angry and yelled for him to stay away. She wants to end it all. She wondered to herself why her mother was so attracted to killing her husbands. Ophelia is doing it for the first time, but she is so scared and empty inside. Her brother still stopped her, and our heroine shouted what he was even doing. The young man replied that he didn't need to. The girl exclaimed whether he realized that she had almost cut off his hand. The young man replied that he was sorry, but there was no time for that now. If she used magic, it would all be in vain. He then held her close to him and told her that he was the only one in Arpad Manor who knew that she was a mage. Then he added that this investigator should just be finished off, and he would do it himself. Then walked over and finished off the culprit. Ophelia screamed that he didn't need to, but he didn't listen to her and said that he didn't want to involve her in this. Our heroine screamed why he was getting involved. This was something she had to deal with on her own. Seeing the smile on the young man's face, the girl asked why he was so satisfied. Alexander replied that it wasn't that he was having fun, he was just happy. After which he added that these lips sew and want to kiss. Our heroine pushed him away from himself and said that stop joking. How can he say something like that? Why did he kill him so easily? After all, there was so much more she wanted to ask. Wiping the blood from his face, the young man replied that he was overcome with jealousy. From the moment his brother had first seen that man, he had disliked him immediately. He suddenly showed up at the mansion out of the blue and got close to her, and then, under the pretext of searching the mansion, Claude was having conversations that the Duke didn't like. He asked the girl if she had a date with whom they would climb the sacred staircase together, alluding to himself. That obnoxious smile, the meaningless, flippant words with actions. Everything about him disgusted him. Moreover, he knows about her past after all. Hearing that, the guy just couldn't stand by. It's not like she told him anything about herself. Although it doesn't matter anymore since that intruder is dead. Suddenly, the real investigators appeared and apologized for the delay. When one of them greeted the owner of Arpad Manor, Alexander asked what his name was. The young man replied that his name was Claude, and he was an investigator of the first rank. He then turned his attention to the corpse of the fake and said that he had a general idea of what had happened. The girl asked that if his name is Claude, then who is that man? The boy replied that he was a fraud. His real name is Cain. All this time he has been pretending to be him, after which he held out the proof, which was a wanted sheet with his picture on it. It dawned on our heroine that this was the very paper Henrietta was holding in her hand. Ophelia thought to herself that it could not be said that the maid was innocent, but it was a little pity that she had died in this way, after which she said if they knew that her personal maid had died because of this. The young men apologized and said there was no excuse for it. If we talk about Cain, he belonged to the working class and was from an orphanage. From the age of 10, he was known in the South as a pickpocket, and had been in jail so many times that it is hard to count on one's fingers. His crimes were of a petty nature, so no one focused on him. However, they felt that his crimes were getting worse. Most recently, there was an incident in which Kane set an arson fire at the orphanage where he grew up and escaped. He wasn't right in the head, so instead of the scaffold, he went to the meanest prison in the north. However, while being transported, the young man attacked them and escaped. Then he showed up at the mansion. The guy was so smart that he easily stole the ID card, the anti-magic necklace, and even the wallet. They could look at him and see the wound that still hadn't healed. Alexander asked what all the other investigators had been doing all this time then. The young man replied that they had been having a few drinks with some ladies they met nearby, and the socializing had gone on long enough. The Duke replied that he couldn't believe that investigators of the first rank were doing such obscene things. In his opinion, it was worth sending a letter to His Majesty the Emperor. Claude started to plead with him that he didn't need to. Guy asked if they still didn't realize how careless an act they had committed. This morning, he received a telegram from an investigator named Claude. When he opened it, he saw a letter ordering permission to execute the criminal and a search warrant. Do they realize how he felt the moment he found out that the face of the search warrant belonged to the man who had been snooping around every corner of his house, pretending to be an investigator? Can they imagine all the horror he had experienced when he could not find him since this morning, either at the estate or in the village? Our heroine realized why she had not been able to see him this morning. The Duke, however, went on to say that when he found that he was not in the house, he gathered as many people as he could and went in search of them. However, they still failed to catch him. As he grew more and more anxious, the lad remembered something. After Henrietta's death, as an investigator, Kane had started interrogating servants and sowing seeds of discord when he himself didn't have a proper alibi. Suspecting something amiss, the young man returned to the manor in a hurry and saw that his sister was not in the chambers. He doesn't even want to imagine what would have happened if he had been even a minute late. The real investigator started begging to take pity on him, one single time. Ophelia decided to play along and tearfully replied to her brother that she had only survived because of him. Claude exclaimed that they were sorry for the trouble they had caused them. They would accept any punishment. The young man replied that according to Kane, his parents' deaths had not been an accident, but a murder. He had seen with his own eyes the document with the seal of the imperial family. How would they explain it? The investigator replied that he was ashamed to admit it, but this was the first time he had heard of it. He carried several documents with him that bore the seal of the imperial family. Did the young man, by any chance, remember its contents? Alex replied that at that moment he was very shocked, so he could not see in detail. Our heroine wondered that she also did not see what was written in the document. Claude replied that, in that case, the criminal had obviously used one of the papers that were in his bag. Most likely, that document had nothing to do with the carriage incident. Since it had already been learned that the cause of the demise of the two gentlemen was a wheel malfunction, at that time, he was only a second-rank investigator. He didn't know all the details since he wasn't in charge of the case, but he had heard that no evidence pointing to murder had been found. There was one unusual moment, however. On one of the burned wreckage of the carriage, there was a chemical reaction from magic left behind. Ophelia noted that no one had ever reported such a thing to them or explained anything. The boy replied that since it was reported as an accident at the time, the information was not made public. In addition, because energy is occasionally used to repair high-end carriages, the investigators decided that the incident was purely accidental. The young man asked if he could corroborate what he said as an investigator. Claude replied that he was not responsible for the case, but they too were investigating with all their might. The girl asked why he was attacking the man with such a frightening expression. Such results were the fruit of careful work, after all. Maybe he shouldn't tell him off like that. Alexander said that even though Kane was a criminal, not all of his words were lies. The investigator said that there was an accident. However, he is sure that this tragedy was an obvious murder, all because he knows the perpetrator of the crime. Most likely, he knows this person himself, namely a maid named Henrietta who worked in their mansion. Our heroine clarified whether the young man is sure of this. The young man answered that yes. The maid herself told him. She confessed everything, crying from a sense of remorse. The investigator asked why Mr. Duke had not reported it to them. The lad replied that he didn't believe her words at the time. The maid was willing to go all out to get his attention. Despite the fact that the summer was long gone, she would drop by his chambers in a single shirt and say that she wanted to come in, under the pretext of being together. Truth be told, Alex hadn't been entirely sure until recently either. However, the moment Claude mentioned about the chemical reaction of magic, everything fell into place. But now she couldn't be punished for the crime she had committed. The investigator muttered that he understood everything. Then they would return to the imperial capital and start the investigation all over again. The young man interrupted him and said, "No. What's the point of reopening a case from 3 years ago? He doesn't want scandalous rumors about their family to spread throughout the empire. The culprit is already dead anyway. Even if they reopen the investigation, they will only find evidence of Henrietta's guilt. Isn't it obvious? So it's better to save each other the trouble. In that case, Alexander will forget that they missed Cain." The young man replied that he was right. Then they would end the carriage crash case and the incident with the outlaw at that point. The young man threw his cloak over our heroine and said that it was time to go back inside, otherwise she would catch cold. Let her not worry. Everything is already over. Already in the mansion, the young man noted that her hands were so cold and she could get sick. Ophelia responded by telling him to wipe his face. It was starting to look very grim because of the traces of blood. Alexander replied that she was right, he should take a bath. This dirt makes it uncomfortable. Our heroine thought to herself that not so long ago, her life hung in the balance, and now they spend time talking. It's so strange, as if everything was a dream and nothing happened. The boy asked what the sister would do now. She replied that she was a little tired. Today, so much happened, so she thought to rest on the couch and drink a glass of whiskey. The young man embraced her and asked her which room couch she meant. When our heroine answered that in hers, of course, Alex said that he was a little upset. The girl said that in that turmoil, she did not manage to say something to him. The guy asked if there was anything else left to be discussed. The guy then wanted to kiss her, but Ophelia stopped him and said that she wasn't even in the bathroom yet. Her face was a little dirty. Alexander pulled her close to him and said that he wasn't worried about it at all. The guy added that it was fine. She is beautiful enough now as it is. After which he kissed her. After a while, the young man asked what she was thinking about. The girl replied that it had been 3 whole years since she had arrived at the Arpad Manor. If so recalled, on the night of her parents' passing, the girl had also been drinking whiskey. When she began, at that point, to worry a lot, the guy gave her whiskey just the same. Our heroine asked what they should do now, and the young man replied that there was no need to worry. He will organize the funeral himself. At that moment, the young man became her support, despite his young age. Afterwards, she asked if she could ask him one question. When she was about to kill Cain, did Alexander remember what he had told her? If she used magic, it would all be in vain. Why had he forbidden her to use magic? Didn't the young man know that she wanted to end the criminal with her own hand? Alexander replied that he knew, and that was why he had done everything in her place. First of all, he didn't want her to touch that man to death. Secondly, it turned out in the process that she was a mage. It would be strange to recognize Henrietta as a criminal. When asked in what sense, the young man replied that he would let her think for herself. Thanks to the late arrival, the investigator was unable to connect anything to the carriage crash and fell for the deception without any suspicion. However, Cain was not like that. He stated right in front of everyone's eyes that their parents were murdered. If someone from the estate found out that she was a mage, the truth might come out. The girl objected that he couldn't know that for sure. The boy replied that, rightly so. However, there was nothing wrong with taking action beforehand. Ophelia asked what for. She thought to herself about the suspicion and worry that hovered around their relationship, and moreover, the behavior from which it seems that he doesn't trust anyone, even being the master of the mansion. So why does her brother still suspect her? Putting her down on the bed, Alex said strangely. Up until this point, he thought he couldn't know what was on her mind. Now he can't believe that today she's like an open book. It's a bit of a surprise. Afterward, the young man asked why she was not happy. He did not expect such a reaction. Our heroine asked why he thought she would be happy. Does he suggest that everything be hushed up and close his eyes? Alexander replied that no, he just wanted her to realize how much he loves her. She realizes that it is not easy to accept the fact that he loves the girl who killed his father. However, the young man has decided to accept it and will continue to do so. Ophelia pushes him away and tells him not to be deluded. Why would it label her a murderer in the first place? Wasn't he the one who silenced her? When the guy tried to object to something, Ophelia said enough is enough. She doesn't want to listen to him anymore. Does he really think she killed her mom with her own hands? The mom she loved more than anything in the world. Alexander replied that that's exactly why she did it. Because she loved her, didn't she? Our heroine screamed that he could even know. The young man replied that he knows. That's why he says so. All because he is a man in whom even such love causes jealousy. Nevertheless, he thinks it is for the best. She finally has only him by her side. Ophelia replied that he is indeed insane. To be jealous, even of her mother, is too much. Alexander replied that he would say it again. The one who melted the carriage bundle was most likely Henrietta. She had confessed it to him herself. The cause of the carriage accident, however, was not the bundle alone. Just like the investigator said, the chemical reaction of magic found in the wreckage of the burned carriage also played a role in it. The chemical reaction was the result of someone drawing a magic circle. Our heroine objected that the servant girl had magic. The young man replied that yes, but her skills were not enough for such a thing. Even though the maid was considered a mage, her skills would only be enough to barely melt a bundle. How would she use magic that could leave such a reaction? Moreover, the carriage had been under repair a year before the incident. Therefore, the chemistry left behind after the repair and disappearing after a week couldn't have stayed all that time. Ophelia said that, after all, he had written in his diary that the carriage had recently had its wheels changed. The young man replied that it had. However, the important thing is that it was not a magician who did it, but an ordinary repairman. Our heroine muttered that she was the culprit. Let her continue her story. Alexander replied that it was true that he was leaving to fix the carriage. However, the problem was that on that day, as it turned out, the mage who fixes carriages was not there. Therefore, he had to entrust the job to a simple repairman. Due to this, there simply couldn't be any magical reaction from the mending because magic was never used on it. Undoubtedly, just as she had said, both she and Henrietta are magicians. However, the difference in their abilities was obvious. Skills were required with which it would be possible not only to draw a magic circle, placing an explosion spell within it, but also to apply the magic itself at a great distance. There isn't a single mage in the duchy capable of such a thing, let alone a maid. However, it's different with the sister. Isn't she strong enough to notice Henrietta's magic before it is applied, and block the spell with a single wave of her hand? The girl replied that she couldn't even sense his presence that day, and he, it turns out, knew everything. Ophelia was surprised beyond belief. The girl then looked at him carefully and replied that she was indeed the one who blew up the carriage. Acting behind her back is her main talent, but what her brother is also capable of, since he knows everything about her. Then he also knew that she had hidden those documents. The young man replied that yes, from the beginning. Our heroine was surprised that he really knew everything. She, of course, knew about his shrewdness, but this is an unexpected turn. Alexander said he was unsure at first. However, that day, sensing her presence, he followed her and became convinced of everything. When the guy found out, the puzzle came together. At that moment, his hunch about her was confirmed. However, don't let him worry, only he knows about it. Ophelia stated that he had been deceiving her all along. Then she asked him if he knew that she was hiding under the table in his room. The boy replied that he did not know that. After which he added that there was no need to ask more about that incident. He was ashamed as it was. Our heroine asked why he pretended to be deceived. Alex replied that it seemed to him that that's what she wanted. It doesn't matter now. After all, he told her recently that he didn't care. The girl replied that it was a lie. If he really didn't care, he wouldn't have said that. He was clearly tormented by the fact that she was his father's murderer. The young man replied that he had already made his point. He had accepted it and was not going to change his mind. Ophelia thought to herself that he certainly couldn't accept it so easily. Only a madman could love the one who killed his father. That's probably why he brought it up, hoping that she would deny everything. He wants to hear that the killer wasn't his sister. Alexander said he doesn't know if she remembers or not, but the day they heard the news about the carriage incident, Ophelia said something. The girl asked if the carriage had slipped off the road. When she was told that it hadn't, our heroine muttered in surprise that it couldn't have. At first he seemed suspicious of her words, but after thinking hard, the guy found the answer. She found it strange that the wheels of the carriage were faulty because she planned to blow it up. Ophelia muttered that just because of those words. How can he speak with such certainty? The young man replied because he loves her, just like she loved her mother. He could understand for the reason that he loved her. Our heroine thought to herself that whether love by nature is like that. It was such an amazing feeling, because of which he feels affection for the girl who killed his father, and can even forgive her. Perhaps a large number of Mom's men, too, wondered why on earth she was losing her husband. However, despite that, even sensing some sort of catch, they still fell under her spell. Therefore, from just one smile from her, the husbands would give their hand without any hesitation. Gradually, they began to feel some abnormalities in their bodies, and even realizing that something was wrong, they endlessly tormented themselves with different thoughts. They said that their mother was giving these supplements only for their benefit, that their spouse was not capable of such things, that it wasn't true, and that it simply couldn't be. That's what all of her mother's husbands probably thought until the very end. Our heroine said she knew the truth. However, she still loved her mother. She does not know how the young man thinks, but for her, the woman was a creature that is simply impossible not to love. Thanks to her she was born. Thanks to her she could eat enough, wear beautiful clothes, and live in a warm house. However, because of such a mother, she had to be a murderer's accomplice all her life. There was no other way out. No, it was the only way. The woman had promised her that this would be the last place. The girl could no longer stand idly by. So she made a decision. If Mom couldn't stop on her own, she should do it. The young man noted that she seemed to still love her mother. The girl replied that she did. Her appearance, in which she was before she left, still flickers before her eyes. That's why every single day, she regrets to death what she did. The first thing to do was to find all the syringes hidden in different corners of the house. It was a secret that only she should know. However, when she heard the news that the Duke's carriage slipped off the snowy road, resulting in the death of both, the girl thought that it just cannot be. Our heroine, after all, had cast a spell and explosion. About the carriage did not emanate other magic. How to understand all this? Ophelia felt regret. She began to think that she had made a mistake. The girl wondered why she had done that, and why she hadn't gone after her. She should have dealt with the syringes later, why she couldn't be there for her until the very end. That night she was racked with such shock that she still remembered to this day. She was overcome with a feeling so strange that our heroine couldn't believe it herself. Every time she covered her mother's tracks, she thought about the fact that let this be the last time. She wants to be free. However, when Ophelia heard that the Duke had died along with her mother, a feeling of envy came over her. Why, in the last moment of her life, there was some man next to a woman? Why did she let the Duke meet the end with her when she couldn't do it herself? Why the girl didn't follow her? Only she knew her mother's secret, and only she could understand her. Her mother was supposed to be only our heroine. The young man asked if Ophelia was jealous of her mother for his father. The girl answered that, yes, and it is very strange. However, it was her love for her. Her affections and greed ruined the mother and his father. Alexander is right. He loves his father's murderer. Our heroine is sure that this is the answer he most did not want to hear. After which she asked what the young man will do now. The young man replied that although he knew the truth, but hearing it now from her, he experienced a strong shock. The girl noted that this was not surprising. Since he now knew everything, how could they live on pretending that nothing had happened? Pulling her to him, the boy noted that he seemed hopeless. Even during her story, he hadn't allowed the thought of giving up on her. Alexander only had thoughts in his head that he really wanted to kiss her. Our heroine pulled him away from her and asked him if his head was all right at all. Hadn't he heard? She was the one who killed his father. The young man took her hand and repeated that he had told her that all was already lost with him. Ophelia replied that she would then tell him the whole truth in the most minute detail, leaving nothing out. Her mother was indeed like a butterfly. If you reach out to this beauty, it will immediately fly away, fluttering its wings. That's the kind of person this woman was. That's why our heroine killed her, because she didn't want to let go of that hand anymore. Ophelia didn't want to be abandoned like those people. The woman was a farmer's daughter, so she was well aware of poisonous and medicinal plants from childhood. Her mother knew all too well how to use even the unknown flowers that grew on the road in such a way that they could either save a person's life or deal a devastating blow. Her angelic appearance inspired confidence in absolutely everyone. If she looked with a sparkling smile with her blue eyes, even attracting an unknown syringe with the words, "This is for you," no one could doubt her. The young man might find it hard to believe, but that's exactly how her own daddy died too. The young man asked that didn't anyone suspect anything. Ophelia replied that it was simply impossible in that situation. Her father had been a mercenary and had been attacked in the midst of a riot on the day of his death. Who would have thought that his death was Mom's fault? Even she, who was closest to her, didn't know of the man's death until the news of his passing. The girl learned the truth when her mom met Kane's birth father. After her first stepfather, Cameron, died, her first suspicions began to visit her at her stepfather's funeral. The man, of excellent health and strong build, died suddenly of blood poisoning. It was then that she first felt something wrong. The girl thought about the fact that first there was a father, now there was a stepfather. Why there was only misfortune happening to her mother. When the little girl went to her mother's room to give her tea, she did not find her in the bedroom. After that, she thought that maybe she had gone for a walk. Then she noticed the tip of a syringe peeking out from under the bed. There she also found another box of various herbs and some number of syringes. Tiny remembered that her mother used them when she injected her stepfather with supplements from time to time. However, she didn't understand why there were also poisonous herbs lying there along with them. When the woman returned home, her daughter asked if it was okay to throw syringes around like that. Then she thought to herself that maybe she had misunderstood. They might not be poisonous, but medicinal herbs. So I mentally begged her to deny it. But the woman asked her to keep it a secret. She knew for sure that the girl could not refuse her. As always, Mother was right. Even sensing something wrong, Ophelia could not utter a word. That's right, Mother should be happy in the end. Fathers were abandoned by her because they couldn't fulfill her needs. All she had to do was to accept it. So she replied that it would be their secret. Our heroine was content with such a life and wanted no more. Even if they were not rich then, but in a beautiful house and together with her mother. However, unfortunately, the woman did not want to stay in one place. Her mother informed her that Baroness Blanchette wished to see her as her interlocutor. Therefore, she decided to travel to see her the following week. Having tasted the luxurious life, the mother wanted more: a huge mansion, a large number of servants, luxurious stones and dress. However, it was far from everything. As a result, Mother coveted to elevate her status. The Baroness was very friendly and treated Ophelia well. She said that the girl was very similar to Isolde. The little girl, however, thought to herself that every time the Baroness showed kindness in complete ignorance, she worried that her mother might go on a killing spree again. Blanchette had loved her as her own daughter. Despite this, our heroine had been unable to prevent her illness. Even after the Baroness died, the thought never crossed her mind that she should stop her mother. Instead, Ophelia became her accomplice. The woman would hug her and tell her that she made her job so much easier. The girl must know that her mother loves her very much after all. Blanchette showed Ophelia a generous love. However, she did not succeed in keeping her away from her mother. Isolde nursed the woman, and the Baroness supported them. She told our heroine that it was not necessary to make such a face. Nothing could be done about it, and my lady would not want the girl to be sad. It was at that moment that the girl realized something. This murder she and her mother had committed was a horrible act that deserved no forgiveness. The Baroness's demise had come as a great shock to her. She was worried about the Baron who had suddenly lost his wife, and puzzled over how she could save him. However, unlike him, she thought, the Baron was not saddened by his wife's death. On the contrary, he immediately asked for her mother's hand in marriage, as if he had been waiting for this moment. The girl thought to herself that even though their marriage was political in nature, but after all, this is too much. In the end, she took a step back from the position of a man. All the same, her mother would leave him when she got tired of him. A few years later, her hunch was confirmed, and the Baron passed away. People whispered that, after all, he had only recently married, and it was very strange. They said that all her previous husbands had died. Were they really accidents? Could the woman be a witch who devours her husbands? Ophelia thought to herself that this isn't the first time this has happened, so their reaction is understandable. From now on, they would have to cover their tracks more carefully. Isolde was gradually becoming the object of suspicion, and she was even more anxious to get rid of the evidence. Even as she burned things that could instill suspicion, our heroine felt no compassion for her mother's husbands. They themselves followed her. In the case of Baroness Blanchette's death, however, it was different. She was innocent. The woman died only because she was the wife of a baron. After that death, she was overcome with remorse and skepticism. Such an affectionate baroness was killed simply because of her mother's selfishness and desire to take her place. Perhaps Blanchette knew this would happen. Maybe it was because she sensed the difference in her husband's attitude toward her and her mother, or because her health was deteriorating as she interacted with them. Perhaps she could even foresee her imminent death. Our heroine approached Isolde and asked if they couldn't stop already. She wondered if she wanted to live a simple and ordinary life like before. After all, they now have a house and enough money. How about living an ordinary life like everyone else? The woman interrupts her and asks what she means. The woman didn't know what she was talking about at all. Seeing her mother's smile, Ophelia realized that she still wasn't satisfied. That angelic face that looked at her was like the face of a man who had forgotten all the murders he had committed before. At that very moment, our heroine realized that her mother was different from her from the very beginning. In her angelic smile, there was not a single drop of regret, and the one whom the woman met at that very moment was Alexander's father. Arpad was Isolde's perfect type: countless wealth, gorgeous looks, and a family of pure-blooded aristocrats. It was the man who was the one who could realize the desired. The closer her mother got to him, the greater was her moral exhaustion. The girl dwelt in nightmares filled with the rage of Mom's victims. Time passed, and our heroine lost more and more weight, but despite this, she consoled herself and tried to hold on. Then she decided that most likely the woman had not killed her, because Ophelia must be important to her. As her due spirits began to slowly erode, our heroine met Alex. The suspicion and the look as if shunning her could be felt in his beautiful voice and elegant gestures. Though she was surprised by his chilling gaze and behavior, by which it was clear that he was not pleased with her, without knowing it herself, she felt that she could not take her eyes off him. Alexander, however, began to avoid her without fail, apparently because she did not come to his liking. At times, Ophelia felt a stare on her, but for looking back, she saw no one. This happened countless times. After a while, the Duke decided to show her the library, and she immediately plunged into reading. The girl began to slowly settle into the duchy, and they were becoming like other families. Thankfully, Isolde seemed happy in this place as well, and her demeanor calmed her down, until the very moment our heroine discovered the syringe in the woman's dressing room. Ophelia couldn't believe her eyes. After all, her mother had said it was the last time. After that, she, in secret from everyone, nights in the night to deal with syringes, turning the whole mansion upside down. Maybe the syringe the boy found was one of them. The young man asked that since she was covering her tracks, why she had left a magic circle on the carriage. Our heroine replied that she had once seen her mother walking back and forth in front of the door to his room. The girl wondered what she was doing there at such a late hour, and asked why she was standing outside his bedroom. The woman replied that Alex had said he wasn't feeling well, so she wanted to give him antibiotics. Ophelia countered that that was why she'd asked her to bring Alexander water and honey recently, wasn't it? Isolde immediately realized that she had, replied that she had, and said that she would go to bed then. The girl noted to herself that her mother was getting into action again. This wasn't a village in the provinces. There were eyes and ears everywhere in this place. She couldn't take it anymore. Since the woman didn't think of keeping the promise she had made, something had to be done about it. The only thing left to do was to force her. On the way, Ophelia thought about the fact that her mother had said this was definitely the last place, hadn't she? But she was going to take the lives of innocent people again. The girl can't believe that everything she said was a lie. If Isolde won't listen to her, she has to stop her by force. Duke Arpad was of no importance to her at that moment. He had already fallen into his mother's trap, and even without her, he was destined to die. Even watching this one as the woman left, our heroine felt no regret. A while later, she had already heard about the incident. The servants whispered that it couldn't be. Mr. Duke had passed away on his honeymoon. Could it be that the carriage had been badly repaired? The reaction of everyone around her was in line with her expectations. No one could think the fire was her doing. All they kept saying was that the carriage was a bundle. Everything seemed like just an accident, but she was the only one who recognized the truth. The moment she realized that Isolde was really dead, the girl realized that she had committed murder. After that, she madly began to regret what she had done. Should she have pretended that day that she hadn't noticed anything, or should she have helped her mother? It would have been better for Ophelia to be burned in that very carriage rather than the Duke. Since she was going to kill her mother, she had an obligation to follow her. The opportunity to be with her mother should have belonged only to our heroine. After all these thoughts, she decided that she could not live together where only a trace of Isolde remained. Therefore, at the end of the funeral, Ophelia was going to leave the duchy. The young man asked where she was even going to go next. The girl replied that to the Holy Empire. She was ready to take all crimes upon herself, so she wanted her mother's sins to be absolved. Climbing the stairs, Ophelia was going to repent of everything and follow her mother. That's exactly what our heroine thought, but that very day she met Alexander. Seeing him, who tried with tears in his eyes to hold her, The thought came into her head that at least for a while she should take responsibility. At that moment, she didn't know why she had gotten so angry when her mom was going to hurt him and why she couldn't push him away. So she decided that at least until he came of age, she should stay at the mansion as his guardian. The problem, however, was that he was too savvy. The young man's suspicion of her, a good-naturedness for which she could find no reason, and a faint sense of tension. Despite this, to her surprise, Ophelia began to think of him and gradually forget Isolde's absence. From the moment they had been alone, the Arpad mansion, full of misery and traces of her mother, had become more and more to her liking. It had happened precisely because of Alexander, after which she added that that was all she knew. She told him the truth, and it was as if a stone had fallen from her soul. Suddenly, midnight struck, and Ophelia realized that this was the end of those promised 3 years. Now, all that was left for them to do was to say goodbye. The girl stood up and said it wasn't too late. We should go after the investigators and have them pick her up. They weren't supposed to be far away yet. The young man asked if she was really saying that now. Our heroine replied that, why should she joke? Then she approached him, leaned over, and sincerely congratulated him on his 20th birthday. The young man grabbed her hand and said that he was not going to send anyone after anyone. Ophelia tried to object that it wouldn't change anything. The boy replied that she could make up anything she wanted, but he didn't want his sister to leave. Cain is already dead and the investigators left without suspicion. Why is she doing all this then? In the whole mansion, only 2 people know her secret. The girl can't even imagine, but from the moment that young man crossed the threshold of the mansion pretending to be an investigator, does she realize how badly he wanted him out of her midst? In other words, for her sake, Alexander had been willing even to disobey the emperor's order. The girl replied that she intended to repent Cain anyway. The young man exclaimed that at least she understood how much he feared it. It was the same with Henrietta's death. All he could think about was that who killed her was completely unimportant. All that matters is that it's another chance not to lose Ophelia. You could blame the murder on her. It would be right, because the maid herself admitted that she melted the carriage mount. Our heroine exclaimed that this does not cancel the fact that his father died at her hands. Alexander replied that he had already repeatedly told her that he did not care whether she killed him or not. The girl said that she could take his life too, just like her father. The boy objected that the sister was not her mother. On top of that, he would honor her death by her hand. Ophelia objected that he was out of his mind. The boy kissed her and said that he'd give up his mind for her. How could anyone ever be sane when she was around? He then hugged her tightly and told her to never dare talk about leaving this mansion again. She knows better than anyone what it's like to be left alone. The girl thought to herself that it was very mean to say such words to a person who, in order not to be alone and to be needed by someone, had clung to her mother's skirt all her conscious life. She loved her mother more than anything else in the world, but at the same time she was terribly afraid of her. If Isolde only knew how her daughter longed to be always by her side. It always seemed to her that the woman would leave her just as she had left all her many fathers, and she herself will fly away like a butterfly. Our heroine replied that the boy would regret it. He will get tired of her clinginess and selfishness. Alexander simply will not withstand her society. The young man stated that she still continues to worry about him. He does not understand why he should regret anything. The very day she arrived in Arpad, the guy had already decided for himself that he would never part with her. So the only question is whether she can stand him. At that very moment, Ophelia realized that it was too late to turn back. Perhaps the hour she arrived at this estate and met Alexander, she already had it in her mind that she was destined to never leave this mansion.